The second season closed on a high note. Myung and his companions are on the road to Yunnan, escorted by Kyung, the leader of the Peace Merchant Guild. The journey, however, is already testing Myung's patience. He complains loudly that they are moving far too slowly and that he wants to push the pace. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, Kyung announces that they must stop and make camp before dark. Myung hates the idea, but he has no choice, at least for now. Then, as if fate itself decided to throw him a bone, bandits arrive. They demand that the group hand over all their valuables if they want a quick death. Myung's reaction is anything but fear. He lights up like it's his birthday. He throws himself at the bandits with pure, unrestrained excitement, and what follows is a one-sided beatdown of spectacular proportions. He beats them bloody, pummeling faces until they're swollen beyond recognition. The bandit leader ends up on his knees, sobbing, begging for his life. Cheon surveys the wreckage and delivers the first deadpan remark of the evening. He reminds Myung that he had specifically told him not to hit anyone in the mouth, because now he cannot understand a single word the bandit leader is saying. Myung shrugs it off, insisting it is not his fault that they pissed him off by resisting. Cheon, momentarily speechless, thinks to himself that only a complete asshole beats the living hell out of someone just because they resist. He then asks the practical question, what exactly do they do now that they have captured this many bandits? Myung answers without missing a beat, what else? He already told him. They use them as horses. He turns to the bandits kneeling before him, his tone dropping into something cold and menacing. He tells them plainly that he is not normally the type to spare bandits, mounted or otherwise. But today, he adds with a slow smile, they are lucky. The bandit chief breaks into a cold sweat. To his eyes, the man standing before him is not human. He is a demon. And so, 5 bandits begin pulling the carriage at an almost inhuman speed. Myung looms over them, demanding to know if they are slacking off, whether their legs feel weak, and reminding them that he kept them alive because they had some use, though he notes their worth seems to be diminishing with every passing second. The bandits shriek back that that is absolutely not the case, and pull even harder. Kyung watches all of this with visible discomfort and finally asks whether it is really all right to enter Yunnan like this. Myung seems genuinely puzzled by the concern. Kyung lays out his worries carefully. A horse carriage pulled by human beings is going to attract a great deal of attention. Their group is now larger than expected, and he wonders what they are supposed to say if anyone asks about these extra men. Myung's answer is immediate and completely unfazed. He tells Kyung to simply inform anyone who asks that those men are mounted bandits. When Kyung fails to follow his logic, Myung spells it out. No one will question it if they explain they are simply making use of bandits who attack them first. There is no need to lie. Kyung pushes back, still uneasy, arguing that the people from the Beast Palace will never accept these men as legitimate members of their group. Myung waves it away, suggesting they say their escort captain beat the hell out of the bandits and is forcing them to pull the carriage as punishment. He is quite sure everyone will find that explanation perfectly satisfying. Meanwhile, the escort captain in question is privately thinking to himself that those bandits are, in fact, considerably stronger than he is. Myung presses on enthusiastically, declaring the whole arrangement to be perfectly efficient. The bandits pull the carriage by day and set up camp by night, and if anything else needs doing, they can handle that too. Kyung concedes that the bandits probably prefer this over dying. Myung then casually proposes that if Kyung truly objects to the plan, they can always find a quiet spot and bury the bandits instead. After all, they cannot simply release dangerous criminals and let them endanger innocent people. The bandits collectively lose their composure. They erupt into frantic promises, swearing they will pull like dogs. No, like cows. That they want to work and will do absolutely anything asked of them. They address Myung by every title they can think of: quartermaster, boss, Buddha, anything to stay alive. A visibly shaken Kyung agrees to bring them along, and the bandits thank him profusely. Myung stands, satisfied, announcing he takes that as permission. He then offers, almost helpfully, to break a few arms just to put Kyung's mind at ease. Kyung nearly chokes, insisting that he absolutely should not do that. The bandits immediately fall over themselves, swearing they are perfectly capable of understanding words and that they understood everything. Myung ignores them entirely, draws his sword, flips it around, and starts smacking them over the heads with the flat of the blade, demanding to know why, if they understand so much, they ever became bandits in the first place. He makes it clear they are not to expect to be treated like human beings until they reach Yunnan. Cheon and Yoonjong watch from a distance. Yoonjong observes quietly that Chung Myung has actually gotten a great deal kinder, pointing out that in the past, he would have broken their limbs first and only afterwards realized he needed them intact to pull the carriage. Cheon corrects him, noting that in the past Myung would have broken their limbs and still forced them to pull the carriage anyway. Iseal adds her own calm assessment. He did not crush their heads. He is kind. Days pass. The road stretches on. Night falls, and the bandits collapse in tears. One of them barely manages to look at their vice stronghold chief and whimper that he has lost count of how many days this has been going on and that it is simply too hard. The vice chief tells him not to cry because it is hard for him too. There is a painful echo of the past. Just before all of this began, these same men had marched out with fire in their eyes, declaring that this year, the Tiger Stronghold would show every soul who crossed their path just how fearsome they truly were. Now, broken, battered, and half-bald from Myung's repeated strikes, their chief can only stare at the ground and murmur that they had passion once, burning loyalty, grand dreams, but that they had simply picked the wrong crazy bastard to mess with. Meanwhile, a short distance away, Myung is drilling his companions with the same terrifying energy. He launches Ghoul headfirst into the side of the carriage and scolds him, pointing out that proper training should have allowed him to last considerably longer and demanding to know why there is still no improvement. Ghoul answers with blood pouring from his nose and mouth. Cheon, Yoonjong, and Iseal receive the same brutal treatment, and Myung ends each round with the same verdict, that they need to train harder. Kyung watches the nightly sessions from a safe distance, thinking to himself that these people are truly remarkable for being able to endure this monster every single night. Myung, disappointed that none of them lasted longer, dismisses everyone with a short break and announces he is going to take a pee. They can barely stand upright. The next morning, the group presses on into the arid landscape of Yunnan. Malnourished locals line the roadside, staring at the strange sight of men pulling a carriage instead of horses. Cheon announces simply that they are now in Yunnan. Myung surveys the terrain, endless mountains, rocky slopes, farmers scattered across barren land, and not a single member of the Beast Palace in sight. He remarks that he had not remembered this place being quite so mountainous, and notes it is no wonder the government shows so little interest in the region. Cheon admits that he had heard so much about the Beast Palace's dominance over Yunnan that he had expected to be stopped and inspected the moment they crossed the border. Myung points out there is simply no way to keep watch over all of this land. Kyung explains that the territory they directly control is Kunming, where the tea trade operates. Beyond that, they only conduct occasional patrols, and one can go long stretches without encountering them. Myung notices that Kyung looks distinctly nervous for someone saying all that, and calls him out on it. Kyung straightens and explains why caution is essential. The Beast Palace's grip on Yunnan exceeds even the Tang clan's hold over Sichuan. Every person they encounter, including the most ordinary-looking farmer, could be an informant. The fact that they have entered Yunnan, he warns, has almost certainly already reached the Beast Palace. Cheon looks at the locals and observes that the people here are clearly not doing well. Their clothing and the visible parts of their bodies make their malnourishment painfully obvious. Kyung explains that this was never a region known for high food production, since the arable land is simply too scarce. The terraced fields carved into the mountainsides are a direct consequence of that scarcity, and a recent drought has pushed things even further toward the edge. In the past, at least the revenue from the tea trade kept Yunnan afloat, but with that commerce now severed, there is nothing left to fall back on. If the harvest fails, people will starve. Xion asks whether trade with the western regions is not still providing some relief. Kyung responds honestly. The people of the western regions simply do not drink as much tea, and no other place in the world consumes it the way the Central Plains does. Furthermore, the varieties they prefer are entirely different from what Yunnan produces. Xion connects the dots aloud, concluding that cutting off trade with the Central Plains has been absolutely devastating for the region. Kyung confirms it, adding that while Sichuan faces a comparable situation, at least it does not depend on tea to survive, so its people are not starving. He then tells the group that if they reach Kunming without incident, their mission is essentially complete. And then, at last, they arrive. A massive gate rises before them. Kyung announces that this is Kunming. Myung stares at it, and admits it feels more like the entrance to a small village than a proper city. Kyung explains that in Yunnan, the concept of towering city walls like those found throughout the Central Plains simply does not exist. The land cannot support the kind of population density that would make such walls necessary. Myung turns to Kyung and thanks him sincerely for seeing them safely this far. Their paths diverge here, and Kyung's group turns back. Then Myung turns his gaze toward the bandits and asks what they should do with them now. The bandits begin to tremble. Xion suggests they let them go. Myung is not thrilled about the idea, but Xion makes his case. Yes, they committed crimes, but they have suffered more than enough on this journey, and they also seem to be genuinely reflecting on their actions. Showing mercy, he argues, does not seem wrong. Myung pauses, then remarks with apparent warmth that Xion's magnanimity is exactly why he likes him. Xion tells him flatly not to say strange things. Myung turns to the bandits and relays the verdict. Xion says they should let them go. The bandits collapse in grateful prostration, swearing over and over that they will absolutely change their ways from this day forward. But before they can celebrate, Myung drives 2 fingers, crackling with concentrated qi, into each of them. All 5, in quick succession. He then explains calmly that he is letting them go, and that they can stay in Yunnan and idle around or leave and live as ordinary citizens, their choice. However, he makes clear that the seal he has placed on their energy cores cannot be removed unless he himself undoes it, and that if it remains, they will never be able to practice martial arts again. Xion is visibly displeased. Myung preempts his objection by pointing out that if they let all of them go freely, who exactly is going to pull the carriage on the way back, adding that they were better than horses. Xion sighs, knowing he cannot argue with that logic, and then addresses the entire group directly. He reminds everyone that they are not to present themselves as disciples of the Manhwa sect. They are simply members of the Peace Merchant Guild, there to purchase Imperial Gromwell. From behind him, Myung adds that this goes without saying. Xion continues, stressing that under no circumstances should anyone behave in a way that reveals their true identity as Manhwa disciples. From behind him, Myung reinforces the point, telling everyone to make sure they understand. Xion then turns and makes it unmistakably clear that he is directing all of this at Myung specifically, not at anyone else, just him. He is the only one here who genuinely needs to hear it. Myung, apparently offended, insists that Xion has some kind of strange bias against him and that he has never really caused that much trouble. He turns to the group for support, asking whether he honestly seems like someone who would cause trouble in a place this dangerous. The others immediately agree that yes, he absolutely does. Myung is appalled. Xion turns to face the gate and calls out for everyone to follow him in. He pushes it open and stops dead. Everyone crowds around him. What they see drains the color from their faces. Kunming is in ruins. As the group advances through the deserted streets of Kunming, a heavy silence hangs over them. They remark that the situation looks truly dire, wondering if a plague has swept through the region. It is not just the silence, however. There is a complete lack of vitality, as if they are walking through a dead city. Jogul notes that while their journey here had already been grim, he had hoped Kunming would be different. Instead, the heart of the region seems to have it even worse. He knew life became difficult after the tea trade stopped, but he never imagined the decay would be this absolute. Yunjong lingers behind, his gaze fixed on the starving children lining the streets. While he watches them with a heavy heart, the rest of the group moves forward, noting that a severe drought has likely exacerbated the city's suffering. Baek Cheon takes command, suggesting they split up to gather information on the Imperial Gromwell. He instructs everyone to meet again at sunset, and specifically tasks Uiseol with staying close to Chung Myung to ensure he doesn't cause any trouble. Chung Myung scowls, clearly annoyed by Baek Cheon's total lack of faith in him. The scene shifts to a tavern where Chung Myung is busy drinking tea. From the balcony, he surveys the city below and muses to himself that Kunming is on the very verge of ruin. As the former heart of Yunnan, its loss of vitality signals that the rest of the province must be in even worse condition. Uiseol approaches him to discuss the Imperial Gromwell, but before she can speak, Chung Myung anticipates her lecture. He tells her that he knows what her eyes are saying, that while everyone else is desperately searching for the plant under the scorching sun, the youngest of them is holed up in a tea house enjoying a refreshing drink. She simply nods and takes a seat. Chung Myung sighs and claims he will get moving to start poking and digging around for info. His words send a chill through Uiseol, who immediately envisions a demonic Chung Myung violently destroying the city to get what he wants. To keep him settled, she quickly offers to get him more tea. Chung Myung calls out to the tavern owner, ordering a massive spread of food and another pot of their most expensive tea. The owner rushes over, delighted by the large order, but Chung Myung stops him before he can leave. He shows the man a drawing of the Imperial Gromwell. The owner admits that while he knows every tea traded in the region, he has never heard of that specific plant. When Chung Myung asks for someone knowledgeable about medicinal herbs, the owner mentions a local herbalist and offers to call him to the tavern. Chung Myung is pleasantly surprised by the offer. The owner warns that it will take some time for the man to arrive and suggests that tea and snacks might not be enough for the wait. In response, Chung Myung slams a gold coin onto the table and asks if they serve simple dishes as well. Seeing the gold, the owner promises to bring everything: food, tea, and the herbalist. Uiseol asks if this was his intention from the start. Chung Myung explains that Kunming isn't the kind of place where you find information by wandering aimlessly. You need a local expert, and the best method for gathering intel is still cold, hard cash. She watches him in surprise, realizing how smart he is being, which feels quite unlike him. Meanwhile, Jo Gul is growing frustrated. Very few people know anything about the Imperial Gromwell, despite it once being a trade commodity with Sichuan. He wonders if they should have gathered more information before leaving home. As he walks, a lifeless-looking man grabs Jo Gul's hand, begging for money for food. Jo Gul realizes that the deeper he goes into the city, the more hopeless the people become. He decides he needs a new approach. After giving the man some food, he hears a commotion and sees Yoonjong surrounded by hungry children. Yoonjong tries to distribute food fairly, telling the children to stay calm so they don't get hurt. However, the children are too hungry to listen. They snatch the bag of food and flee to eat as quickly as they can. Jo Gul approaches and remarks that the children should have at least thanked him. Yoonjong gently corrects him, explaining that manners only come after a person's belly is full. He asks how one can expect starving children to worry about etiquette when they might have sick parents or siblings waiting at home. Just as he finishes his explanation, they hear a local man shouting at a boy. The man has grabbed one of the children who received food from Yoonjong, accusing him of theft. The boy insists the food was a gift, but the man doesn't believe him, striking the child and threatening to cut his hand off, claiming no one in Kunming would ever share food. Yoonjong intervenes, grabbing the man's arm and demanding to know what he is doing. He confirms that he bought the bun for the boy and reprimands the man for beating a child without knowing the facts. The man apologizes, admitting he assumed it was stolen because charity has vanished from the city. Yoonjong comforts the crying boy and promises to buy him a new bun, which immediately brightens the child's face. Watching this, Jo Gul is deeply moved. He realizes that while he was focused solely on the mission, Yoonjong prioritized those in need. He thinks to himself that Yoonjong is a true Taoist and someone he should learn from. However, the mood shifts when Yunjong turns to Zhou Gul and demands all of his money. Zhou Gul is stunned, asking what they will eat on their way back, but Yunjong reminds him that Baek Cheon still has funds. He tells Zhou Gul that as the son of a wealthy man, he can simply ask for more money when they return to Sichuan. Despite Zhou Gul's protests, Yunjong grows angry and insists. Soon, Yunjong is buying food for every child in sight. When a boy begins to choke from eating too fast, Yunjong barks at Zhou Gul to bring water immediately. They continue to buy food until their pockets are empty. When a group of latecomers arrives and finds the food gone, they don't cry or complain. They simply accept the disappointment with a maturity that breaks Yunjong's heart. Seeing how accustomed they are to suffering, Yunjong turns to Zhou Gul and tells him to buy more. Zhou Gul explains that he has absolutely nothing left. Even his emergency stash is gone. Refusing to let the children go hungry, Yunjong draws his sword and hands it to Zhou Gul. He tells him to sell the blade and buy more food. Zhou Gul is left speechless, seeing that Yunjong is willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of the children. The two are quickly surrounded by children, and Zhou Gul watches in horror as Yunjong prepares to part with his weapon. He reminds him that it is the Plum Blossom Sword, a sacred artifact of the Manhwa Sect. He warns Yunjong that he won't be able to escape punishment if he sells something so precious, questioning why he is going this far for these strangers. Yunjong calmly asks if Zhou Gul truly believes their sect leader would be angry at a disciple for selling a sword to feed starving children. Thinking of the sect leader, he realizes the truth. He wouldn't be angry. In fact, he's the kind of person who would be furious if Yunjong hadn't sold it. Yunjong tells Zhou Gul that enough is enough. He declares that he is a Taoist before he is a swordsman, and he refuses to watch children starve just to keep a blade meant for fighting. He orders Zhou Gul to go and sell it quickly so they can buy more food, promising to find more children in need. Zhou Gul is still hesitant, but Yunjong's shout sends him moving. Just then, Baek Cheon arrives and demands to know what the matter is. The three of them retreat to a quiet alley to discuss the situation. After hearing the story, Baek Cheon tells Yunjong that while he understands his feelings, a few drops of water are not enough to irrigate a dry field. Yunjong says he understands, but his expression remains rigid and unyielding. Baek Cheon notes his stubbornness, realizing that even though Yunjong understands the logic, he has no intention of changing his mind. Yunjong offers a sincere apology, but Baek Cheon continues to weigh the situation in his mind. He knows that generous acts have a proper time and place, and that their primary goal is to find the Imperial Gromwell without drawing attention. Causing a commotion here will definitely expose their presence. He knows that Yunjong is fully aware of the danger and the potential to derail the mission, yet the boy offers no excuses for his actions. Surprisingly, Baek Cheon reaches out, takes Yunjong's hand, and presses his own money into it. He tells them to hurry up, leaving both Yunjong and Zhou Gul stunned. Baek Cheon notes that there probably isn't much food left even in the business district, so they should buy whatever they can immediately. When a shocked Yunjong asks if it's really okay, Baek Cheon explains that while the mission is vital, the sect leader and the elders would never say they did well if they ignored the destitute to achieve success. If they turned away now, they would be in the wrong. He explains that while he wants the Manhwa sect to reclaim its former glory, that glory means nothing without a sense of chivalry. There is no point in standing above all other sects if they must abandon their benevolence to get there. With a small smile, Baek Cheon clarifies that they shouldn't always prioritize chivalry regardless of the situation, but he doesn't believe it will be a problem this time. He urges them to hurry, making Yunjong incredibly happy. When Zhou Gul asks why they need to rush if it isn't a problem, Baek Cheon gives the real reason. They need to finish before Chung Myung finds out what they are doing. They manage to buy the food, and even Baek Cheon joins in to help distribute it. He tells the growing crowd to stay calm because there is plenty left, while Zhou Gul urges them to wait their turn. Yunjong finally manages to give food to the boys who had missed out earlier, and they thank him profusely. However, as dozens more children swarm toward them, Zhou Gul wonders how there can be so many. Baek Cheon reminds him that Kunming is a massive city. These children were simply too hungry to even walk outside until now. Jo Gul points out that they don't have nearly enough food for the sheer number of children arriving, and now even adults are starting to appear. Baek Cheon realizes they are rapidly becoming the center of attention. He briefly considers leaving the remaining food and retreating, but he knows that would cause utter chaos, and people might even kill each other for the scraps. As he struggles to find a solution, a loud voice demands to know what is going on. A group of warriors approaches, and Baek Cheon immediately notices their white martial uniforms that cover only half the body, draped with animal hides. He recognizes them instantly. They are from the Beast Palace. Realizing there are 5 of them, Baek Cheon grows tense. They needed to stay clear of the palace to find the Imperial Gromwell, but now they are face to face. One of the warriors steps forward and demands to know who they are and what they think they are doing. Baek Cheon steps forward with a respectful greeting, claiming they are from Sichuan's Peace Merchant Guild. He explains they are on a trade expedition and decided to share food after seeing the starving children. The Beast Palace warrior repeats the guild's name skeptically, noting he has never seen them before. Baek Cheon claims they are new members, but the warrior isn't buying it. He asks if these new merchants are really providing relief separately from their main group. His tone turns venomous as he asks the Central Plains bastards if they think the people of Yunnan are beggars. He screams at them, asking how they dare act as they please. He tells them that if they are there for trade, they should do their business and leave. He blames people like them for the devastation of Yunnan, accusing them of coming back now just to share food and mock the survivors. Baek Cheon realizes the man is extremely hostile and understands now why there were so few adults among the poor. The palace must be keeping a tight lid on things. He apologizes, stating they have no intention of causing trouble and will pack up immediately. But as the warrior reaches for his sword, another member of the Beast Palace tells him that's enough. The second man argues that even though they are from the Central Plains, they are trying to help those in hardship, and the palace shouldn't look ungrateful. The first warrior seems to back down, and Baek Cheon lets out a sigh of relief. But it's a trap. Suddenly, the warrior lunges, and Baek Cheon is forced to draw his sword to parry the blow. The warrior smiles, noting that Baek Cheon is a skilled martial artist. He mocks the idea of a mere merchant being able to stop his blade and declares them all suspicious, ordering his men to catch them. 3 warriors immediately move to surround Jo Gul and Yunjong. Jo Gul asks Baek Cheon for a plan, and Baek Cheon realizes they have no choice but to fight or flee. Yunjong tries to apologize, but Baek Cheon cuts him off, taking full responsibility for the decision to stay. He orders them to fight, but when Yunjong reaches for his sword, he remembers he doesn't have it anymore. Jo Gul frantically tells him to find a wooden stick or anything to use as a weapon. Yunjong begins to sweat, suggesting he can use close combat techniques, but Jo Gul just yells at him to find a stick. As the Beast Palace warriors tighten their circle, the disciples realize the enemy is far more skilled than they expected. Baek Cheon knows that with one person unarmed, a breakthrough will be difficult. He decides they must break out of the area and begins looking for a retreat route. The leader of the Beast Palace group draws his sword and tells them to stop dreaming of escape, reminding them they are facing the Beast Palace. He gives the order to attack. Baek Cheon points to the front and tells Yunjong to stick close so they can break through together. The warriors block their path, vowing not to let them go. In that moment, someone else arrives on the scene. With a sudden burst of violence, the newcomer begins pummeling the Beast Palace warriors with kicks and punches. With a mocking grin, he asks the group, "Who was it that said I would be the one causing trouble? Me? Or you?" Chung Myung is absolutely losing it, screaming at the top of his lungs. He demands to know how they managed to cause such massive trouble in less than half a day after arriving in Kunming. His voice is so piercing it literally makes Baek Cheon's ears bleed. Chung Myung doesn't stop there, ranting about how he's always the one stuck cleaning up after them and lamenting his supposedly tough life. Baek Cheon, completely drained, mutters to himself that he'd rather just be captured by the enemy at this point. Chung Myung then whirls toward Yoonjong, barking out a question about where the hell his plum blossom sword is in a crisis like this. He mockingly asks if he sold the thing or what. When Yoonjong looks away, unable to meet his eyes, Chung Myung snaps at him, demanding to know why he's looking elsewhere. Jo Gul chimes in, clarifying that he sold it to a grain merchant. Chung Myung is stunned for a second, repeating the words grain merchant as if he can't believe it. He asks for confirmation. Did he actually sell it? Suddenly, Chung Myung bursts into a loud, mocking laugh. He points out the absurdity of the situation, noting how just a while ago, they were the ones telling him that he would be the one causing all the problems. Then, the rage returns. He screams, asking if this is how their sect is supposed to run. He is baffled by the sheer incompetence, asking if Yoonjong has lost his mind for selling his sword and threatening to sell the rest of them to the grain merchant too. The leader of the Beast Palace men finally interrupts, calling Chung Myung a brat and asking who the hell he thinks he is. He asks if Chung Myung even understands the situation they're in. Chung Myung's face twists into a terrifying expression as he screams back, asking who he's calling a brat. He demands to know who the man thinks he is and how he dares speak so rudely to someone he's meeting for the first time. The man is taken aback, wondering if he's just dealing with a literal crazy person. But Chung Myung keeps going, telling the man he'll deal with him later before turning back to Baek Cheon. He tells him not to worry, claiming he isn't like a certain someone and won't cause any trouble. Baek Cheon, reaching his breaking point, desperately begs him to just stop, admitting he was wrong. Chung Myung continues his self-righteous streak, claiming that all he's been doing is searching hard for information without causing any trouble at all. He explains that he's realized there isn't much they can do about the Imperial Gromwell in Kunming on their own. Baek Cheon asks what he means by that, and Chung Myung points toward the Beast Palace men. He explains that, apparently, they have to talk to those guys if they want to get their hands on the Imperial Gromwell. When Baek Cheon asks for the next move, Chung Myung nonchalantly replies that they'll just rough them up a little and then go meet the Beast Palace Master. To him, it's clearly the fastest way to get things done. Jo Gul mutters that it's actually the fastest way to die. Ignoring him, Chung Myung turns to the Beast Palace warriors and gives them a choice. He asks if they want to take the group to their palace master right away, or if they'd prefer to do it after their faces are swollen and beaten. A heavy silence falls over the crowd. Finally, the leader asks if they truly want to be brought there. When Chung Myung confirms, the man gives a sinister smile. He says it's been a while since they've had guests in Kunming and agrees to lead the way. Chung Myung is actually surprised, remarking that the man is much easier to talk to than he expected. He tells him to lead on, thinking everything is working out great. The man laughs, assuring them he can definitely bring them there. But a split second later, Chung Myung senses other warriors approaching. He turns to see dozens of fighters closing in from every direction. The leader's tone shifts as he tells Chung Myung that the method of bringing them will be a little different from his expectations. Suddenly, they are surrounded by at least 100 men. Chung Myung looks around at the ambush, noting that they certainly have a lot of people. He jokes that at this rate, some of them might as well crawl up from underground. The leader simply tells them to let them show the way, explaining that it's their rule to bring intruders to the palace master alive anyway. The scene shifts back to Manhwa, where sect leader Hyunjong is staring out at the mountains. Hyunseng approaches him, asking if he's worried about the young disciples again. The sect leader admits that while he's told himself repeatedly that sending them was for the sake of the sect, he can't help feeling uneasy. Hyunseng consoles him, saying it's no easy task to control one's feelings. He urges the sect leader to believe in them, reminding him that Hyunyoung always says the disciples are better than they ever were. Hyunseng admits he now believes that to be true, and that if they think about it carefully, it's definitely the case. Hyunseng continues, saying they just need to be the foundation that supports the youth, a solid ground that won't collapse under their feet. The sect leader agrees, but admits he still worries because they've never been that far from Mount Hua before. Suddenly, Hyunyoung comes running in, frantically calling for the sect leader. Hyunjong asks what could be so urgent this early in the morning. Breathless and agitated, Hyunyoung screams that he shouldn't be here and needs to move right now because the Tang clan is right in front of their gates. Stunned, the sect leader asks, "Who?" And Hyunyoung yells that it's the Tang clan patriarch himself. Hyunjong is completely shocked. They open the gates and see Tang Gun AK, the patriarch of the Tang clan, who offers a formal greeting to the Manhwa sect leader. The Manhwa leadership is floored by this incredibly respectful and warm greeting. Hyunjong thinks to himself in disbelief, wondering if the Tang clan patriarch is really offering his greetings first. Recovering his composure, Hyunjong introduces himself as the sect leader of Manhwa and returns the greeting, admitting he was so startled by the personal visit that he momentarily lost his cool. Tang Gun AK laughs and thanks him for the warm welcome. When Hyunjong asks what brings him so far, Tang Gun AK explains that his visit is regarding the disciples' recent stay at the Tang clan estate. The sect leader is confused, and Hyunyoung immediately panics, assuming Chung Myung must have done something terrible again. However, Tang Gun AK explains the true nature of the events. A shocked Hyunjong asks if he really means it. Did the Tang clan truly become friends with Chung Myung and the others? Not just allies, but actual friends? Tang Gun AK tells him there's no need for such surprise. He simply came because he truly wanted to build a good relationship with the Manhwa sect and has no hidden intentions. As proof of his sincerity, he calls his daughter forward. Tang Soso bows and introduces herself, announcing that she has left her clan to join the Manhwa sect. She expresses her hope that they won't cast her out. The sect leader and the others are frozen in shock. Tang Gun AK confirms she is indeed his daughter. Hyunjong is reeling, wondering why on earth someone from the Tang clan would want to join them. Hyunsang leans in and tells the sect leader that this proves the young disciples are better than them. He remarks that they must be doing well in Yunnan, as they are no ordinary children. The sect leader finally beams with pride, agreeing that they'll surely do well. He tells himself there's no doubt about it. After all, they are the disciples of Manhwa. The scene shifts back to Yunnan, where Chung Myung is relaxing, remarking how nice and comfortable the situation is. He says they should have done this from the start. Baek Cheon snaps at him, asking if he seriously finds this comfortable. In reality, the entire group has been locked inside a cage. Chung Myung argues that it's not like they had a better solution. He explains that they need to ask the Beast Palace to get the Imperial Gromwell, and if the master doesn't give permission, his men won't tell them anything. Therefore, meeting the master is the fastest way. Baek Cheon loses his temper completely, screaming that the cage is exactly the problem, calling him a cursed brat. Chung Myung then turns to Yu Iseol and asks when she got caught. She bluntly responds that she was behind him the entire time. Chung Myung comments that she has zero presence, but notes that it didn't stop her from getting captured anyway. He tells her she should make better use of that lack of presence in the future. Baek Cheon yells again, reminding Chung Myung that he previously claimed they weren't captured, but Chung Myung just pretends not to hear him. He then looks over at Yunjong, who looks utterly demoralized, and asks what's wrong with him. Baek Cheon sighs, explaining that Yunjong seems to think he's the reason they all got caught, even though Baek Cheon has told him repeatedly that isn't the case. Chung Myung scoffs, asking who exactly is captured. He insists they are simply traveling there in a comfortable manner. Baek Cheon gives up, stating he isn't even going to argue with him anymore. Despite the bickering, Yunjong remains silent, lost in his own brooding thoughts. Noticing Yunjong's lingering silence, Chung Myung offers a rare moment of grounded wisdom. He tells his senior that good intentions don't always yield good results. In this world, plenty of people are driven by kindness only to end up suffering because of it, but he asks if that truly invalidates everything they've done. When Yunjong finally looks up, Chung Myung flashes a smile and asks if he performed those good deeds just to receive a bit of gratitude. Yunjong's mind flashes back to the two children who thanked him so sincerely after he gave them food. He quietly admits that receiving thanks wasn't the point. Satisfied, Chung Myung tells him to pull himself together and endure the situation, assuring him that what he did wasn't wrong. Deep down, Chung Myung's thoughts drift to the past. He reflects on how the Manhwa sect once sacrificed everything for the sake of the world, only to be scorned and exploited by those they saved. He wonders if that makes their legacy a mistake, but he quickly shuts down the thought. Even if he or the rest of the world thinks that way, he knows his Sayoung, Chung Mun, and the other disciples who gave their lives would have no regrets. They would stand with their heads held high. If they hadn't stopped the heavenly demon by sacrificing everything, the Manhwa sect would have vanished long ago, and the Central Plains would be a much darker place. He looks toward the heavens, silently asking for Chung Mun's agreement, but his sentimental mood quickly sours. On second thought, he finds it absolutely infuriating. The seniors were the ones who created all this trouble, yet he's the one going through hell to fix it in this life. He wonders if his old sect leader is enjoying his rest while he suffers. Joe Ghoul interrupts his internal rant, pointing toward the horizon. They have finally arrived at the southern region Beast Palace. Baek Cheon scans the horizon with a heavy heart. Behind the giant pavilion lies a forest so dense it feels as though no light could ever pierce the canopy. It is a jarring shift from the barren plains they traveled across to get here, a completely different landscape. To him, the entrance is designed in such a way that it feels less like a palace and more like they are walking directly into a predator's cave. While the others are tense, Chung Myung is simply marveling at the architecture, casually noting that these people must be incredibly rich. Baek Cheon is left speechless, wondering how money is the only thing on Chung Myung's mind in a life or death situation. As they reach the threshold, the order is given to open the gates. The guard leader who captured them turns back with a grim warning, stating that while many prisoners have been brought to the Beast Palace, none have ever left alive. Chung Myung doesn't miss a beat, mockingly telling the others to take notes on the man's speech if they want to learn how to sound tough. The leader growls, telling Chung Myung to see how long that arrogance lasts as he officially welcomes them to the Beast Palace. Inside, the courtyard is swarming with martial artists and their animal companions. It is a chaotic menagerie of black panthers, massive serpents, tigers, and eagles. Chung Myung takes in the view, admitting to himself that it's quite the sight. He had heard that Beast Palace artists could control animals, but he didn't expect them to actually live together in such close quarters. He muses that if he'd known it was like this, he would have visited much sooner. Joe Ghoul stares at a nearby snake, trembling as he notes that given its size, it could easily pass for a dragon. Everything here, from the beasts to the atmosphere, feels twice as large and twice as dangerous as anything they've seen before. Baek Cheon watches a tiger sitting calmly beside a person, while Joe Ghoul looks up to see the sun being blocked by birds the size of humans circling overhead. Their captor sneers at their shock, telling them not to be surprised since they will soon become nothing more than animal feed. To emphasize the point, they pass a lion that hungrily licks its chops at the sight of them, sending a shiver down Joe Ghoul's spine. Baek Cheon carefully counts the numbers, noting over 100 martial artists in the immediate area. Regardless of their individual strength, their sheer numbers might already rival the combat monks of Shaolin. He realizes that since the Beast Palace must have members spread across all of Yunnan, the force gathered here is likely just a fraction of their true power. Suddenly, the guards cut the ropes binding them, finally setting them free as they begin to ascend the stairs. Baek Cheon acknowledges the overwhelming aura of one of the 5 outer palaces, but Joe Ghoul finds the situation strange. He whispers that it's odd they were released and allowed to keep their weapons, wondering if the guards aren't worried about an escape attempt. Baek Cheon replies that this is a deliberate display of power. The guards are telling them that resistance is pointless. Even if they escaped the palace, they would never survive the trek through Yunnan to reach Sichuan. Joe Ghoul reluctantly agrees. As they approach the main hall, the doors to the master's chamber creak open. A ferocious, enchanted beast suddenly lunges out, leaping over their heads before landing with a snarl. Before it can strike, Chung Myung reaches out and grabs it with a single hand. He stares at the creature, casually asking if it's supposed to be some kind of cat. Jo Gul frantically asks what part of that monster looks like a cat, while Yoonjong notes that it appears to be a high-level enchanted beast. Ignoring their panic, Chung Myung begins to scratch the beast under its chin, cooing at it and calling it a cute little thing. Jo Gul screams for him to stop, certain he's about to lose a finger. The beast snaps its jaws around Chung Myung's finger, but instead of biting down, it starts to lick him affectionately. The others watch in disbelief, realizing the creature is acting out of pure desperation. It sensed a level of danger from Chung Myung that far outweighed its own predatory instincts. Chung Myung laughs, calling the creature obedient, then jokingly turns it toward Baek Cheon, telling the cat to bite him instead. Baek Cheon tells him to knock it off, but the atmosphere shifts instantly as the Beast Palace Master finally emerges. Yoonjong feels the change first, describing heavy tremors and an oppressive presence that feels like a giant tiger approaching. Baek Cheon doesn't need to be told who it is. The sheer weight of the man's aura confirms he is the ruler of this land. A massive, imposing figure stands before them, his voice booming with a lethal chill as he asks the people of the Central Plains how they dare to set foot in Yunnan. The master of the Beast Palace draws a deep breath, the air visibly rushing into his lungs as his massive beast covers its ears in anticipation. A thunderous roar erupts from his throat as he demands to know who they are, his voice so powerful that the group is forced to clutch their own ears in pain. He continues to bellow, asking who dares to enter this sacred land under a disguise. He warns them to speak their truth immediately, for if their reason is not sufficient, he will tear them all to shreds and throw them to the beasts as feed. Cheon is paralyzed with shock, noting the incredible amount of internal energy radiating from the man. To Cheon, even the Tang clan patriarch pales in comparison to this monster. He is at a level beyond anyone Cheon has ever seen. The Beast Master maintains his menacing tone, calling them cursed Central Plains people and threatening to rip them apart in an instant if they make him wait any longer. Watching the man, Cheon realizes he has no intention of listening to excuses. He is simply looking for a justification to slaughter them with a clear conscience. As cold sweat drips down his face, Cheon wonders what to do, knowing a single slip of the tongue could cause an irreversible disaster. Suddenly, Chung Myung steps forward. He calmly states they are from the Manhwa Sect and have come to find something, asking if the master could help them. The rest of the group is horrified by his bluntness. The master of the Beast Palace freezes, repeating the name of the Manhwa Sect. He asks if they are truly from the sect that used to be part of the cursed 10 great sects. Chung Myung boldly confirms it. The master presses further, asking if they are from the sect in Shangxi, and when Chung Myung confirms again, the master's eyes widen. He realizes what this means. At supersonic speed, he vanishes and reappears directly in front of Chung Myung, asking if they are the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme himself. The group watches in stunned silence. Suddenly, the master swings his massive hands toward Chung Myung with enough power to displace the very air around them. Cheon screams for him to stop, but the blow never lands. Instead, the master of the Beast Palace snatches Chung Myung up, hoisting him into the air like a prized trophy and shouting a boisterous welcome. The tension vanishes instantly as the master begins to laugh, ordering his people to prepare a feast because honored guests have arrived. The members of the Beast Palace erupt in joy, dancing and drinking in celebration, leaving a bewildered Cheon to comment to himself that the situation is absolutely insane. Tables are soon piled high with exquisite dishes. The master urges them to eat their fill, though he admits he isn't sure if Yunnan food will suit their palates. He presents them with Yunnan's finest liquor, the peach spring fragrance, and insists everyone takes a drink. As they taste the spirits, they are moved by the quality. Cheon notes that an indescribably refreshing scent fills his nose and mouth, concluding that the name peach spring fragrance is more than fitting. The master delivers a heavy pat to Cheon's back that nearly kills him, laughing that the young fellow knows how to make people feel good. He confesses that he has always wanted to visit the Manhwa sect, but held back since he cannot leave for the Central Plains. He beams, stating that having the disciples of Manhwa, the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme, visit him in person makes this the best day of his life. Ghoul eventually asks if the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme is famous in Yunnan. The master's face turns beet red as he screams, asking what Ghoul could possibly mean by that. To him, the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme is obviously a hero of the entire world. He then pauses, asking if the Central Plains people truly don't revere the 5 demon-repelling heroes. When Ghoul admits he has never heard of such a title, the master is struck by a furious shock. He slams his fist down, destroying the dining table in an explosion of wood. He demands to know how they could be ignorant of the 5 demon-repelling heroes, claiming that without them, both Yunnan and the Central Plains would be groaning under the feet of the cruel demonic cult. He spits out that the Central Plains bastards have no sense of gratitude or honor. Chung Myung, still casually eating, asks why he's getting mad at the kids. Cheon is terrified by Chung Myung's audacity, but the master actually calms down. He concedes that the descendants of the Sword Supreme are not the ones who deserve his anger. The master then asks how they could possibly be so ignorant of the heroes who achieved the most brilliant feats in the war. He asks what lies they were told regarding how the cult was defeated. Cheon tentatively explains that they were taught everyone in the Central Plains joined forces. The master scoffs in fury, calling them shriveled-up toads and claiming their joined forces would have only resulted in them being beaten to death. Cheon is so scared he can barely speak, but the master continues his history lesson. He explains that the 5 demon-repelling heroes were the ones who showed the most brilliant performance in that horrific war. One was their ancestor, the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme, and another was his close friend, the Dark Supreme Tang Bo of the Sichuan Tang clan. As for the remaining 3, the master dismissively says there is no need to know them. When Ghoul asks for clarification, the master explains that the term 5 heroes was just forced together by the trash of the martial world who were envious of the Sword Supreme's achievements. They simply took some nobodies who couldn't reach the tip of his toes and called them heroes too. He tells them to remember only one thing. The Plum Blossom Sword Supreme defeated the demonic cult and saved the Central Plains. As Chung Myung looks on with an incredibly smug expression, Cheon wonders why he looks so proud. The master emphasizes that everyone under heaven was saved by him, and Yunnan is no exception. He recalls how, when the demonic cult reached for Yunnan, the Central Plains bastards turned their backs on them, leaving them on the verge of total annihilation. But then, the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme appeared. By striking the cult's rear, he forced their retreat, allowing Yunnan to survive despite the betrayal of the Central Plains. He even recounts how the Sword Supreme rushed all the way to Sichuan to slaughter a detachment sent to finish Yunnan off. He protected them when the Beast Palace would have been destroyed, even though the Central Plains command had opposed him going to help. Cheon finally understands why the people here hate the Central Plains so much. The master declares that they revere him as their savior, which is why the Beast Palace built a shrine for him and holds a memorial service every year. He believes that one who doesn't know gratitude is worse than an insect. Deep in thought, Chung Myung remembers the past differently. He had simply gone where the cult bastards were to beat them up for the fun of it. He recalls a conversation with his friend, the Dark Supreme, who told him that many cultists had appeared in Sichuan. Chung Myung had been eager to go smash their heads, ignoring the command center's orders because he didn't care who they thought they were. Back in the present, Chung Myung muses that if it looked good in their eyes, he supposed that counts for something. The master continues his praise, describing the Sword Supreme as a saint and a martial artist whose sword reached the realm of the heavens, making even the demonic cultists tremble in fear. Chung Myung continues to laugh, thoroughly enjoying the praise. The master finally declares that they are the only Central Plains people who can be guests in Yunnan, telling them to rest easy because Yunnan welcomes them. As Chung Myung and the master begin drinking heavily together, Yunjong remarks on how they seem to be perfectly in sync. Ghoul adds that they look like a father and son reuniting after a long time. Xion observes the master and realizes he is sincere. The people of this place genuinely take pride in Manhua's hero on their behalf. Even though they are in no position to entertain, they are doing their best for them. Xion eventually asks the palace master why. If the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme was as great as he says, his feats are hardly ever mentioned in the Central Plains. The room falls into a heavy silence. The master of the Beast Palace narrows his eyes, stating that it is because those petty Central Plains bastards implicitly made it, as if his deeds never happened. The Beast Palace master looks at Baek Cheon and explains that history is not simply a record of what happened. It is about what is passed down to the next generation. Striking his fist against his chest, he declares that in this place, events only truly become history once they are shared right here. He continues, noting that he has heard the Manhwa sect's current situation is dire. Normally, they should have been the ones telling the story of their ancestors who performed such legendary deeds. However, the sect has lost both the people to tell the tale and the strength to uphold it. That is why those stories could not help but be forgotten. He remarks that history is written by the victors, but if those victors fall into ruin, the scavengers will never miss an opportunity to seize the credit for themselves. He curses the petty bastards of the Central Plains, claiming that if they had only maintained their ties with Yunnan, this tragedy never would have occurred. Chung Myung muses to himself that the situation was likely born out of a sense of debt. He explains that if the Central Plains had acknowledged all the great deeds the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme accomplished during the war, they would never have been able to abandon the fallen Manhua sect. After all, those reputable sects who constantly preach cooperation could never turn away from those to whom they are indebted. However, those who ended the war could not leave any favorable opinions in their wake. Instead, the Central Plains acted as if those deeds never happened. An implicit agreement must have been reached to erase the very fact that they owed anything to the Manhua sect. Chung Myung wonders if things might have ended differently had even one person asked if the sect should be repaid for its sacrifices. But no one spoke up. He sighs, noting that the world has always been this way, and the Jianghu has always been heartless. In fact, he finds it unusual that someone actually remembered the truth and went as far as building a temple to show their gratitude. The Beast Palace master laments that the war took away so much. He believes that if the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme had not achieved deity ascension during that conflict, the entire history of the Jianghu would have been reorganized around his sect. Both the Southern Region Beast Palace and the Manhua sect lost too much in that war, and even after 100 years, they still groan from those wounds. He pours wine into their cups and tells them to take the drink, offering it as someone who shares their circumstances, not as a sect master, but as a comrade bound by a painful history. As everyone drinks, the master observes that the world is heartless and they must be in great pain. Chung Myung, however, disagrees. He says it is strange to think they should have received rewards for what was done back then, as those ancestors likely didn't rush into war expecting a prize in the first place. With his face flushed from the wine, he declares that the past is the past. He asks what it matters to lie on the ground crying about injustice when it is already over. Filling his friends' cups, he insists that what matters is the present. They will simply make the Manhua sect the greatest in their own generation, and then their past will be naturally acknowledged. He concludes by reminding them that history is written by the victors. The Beast Palace Master is stunned by these words. After a few seconds, his face brightens, and he delivers a back slap so powerful it sends Chung Myung crashing into the floor. The master laughs loudly, admitting that the more he hears the boy speak, the more he likes him, even as Chung Myung leaves a literal hole in the floor with his face. The master then realizes he forgot to ask what brought them all the way to Yunnan, noting the long journey from Shaanxi. Chung Myung tells him he was planning to mention it anyway, and asks if a plant called Imperial Gromwell grows in the region. The Beast Palace Master repeats the name with enthusiasm as if he recognizes it, but then his entire demeanor shifts. He abruptly claims he has never heard of it. Evening arrives after a full day of celebration. Joe Gould washes his face, muttering that he thinks he drank too much. He notices Yunjong sitting nearby, lost in thought. Jo-gul mentions he thought the other was sleeping and asks if something is worrying him. Yunjong admits it isn't exactly a worry, but rather an apology, feeling that he has been a burden. Jo-gul asks why he would say such a thing, and Yunjong points out they were lucky things turned out well. He believes that if things had gone wrong, they would have all died because of him. Meanwhile, deep inside the palace, Chung Myung and the Beast Palace Master are still drinking. Jo-gul tries to dismiss the concern, saying that even if things had gone badly, they would have managed somehow with Chung Myung around. Yunjong argues that this is the exact problem. He realized during the journey that he was relying on the idea that everything would work out because Chung Myung was there. As a result, he wasn't just unhelpful, he became a weight for the others to carry. Clenching his fist, he calls himself foolish and vows never to let it happen again. Jo-gul asks why he is being so serious, noting this is the first time he has seen him this way. He recalls the moment Yunjong told him to sell his sword. Yunjong then asks if Jo-gul knows he was an orphan. When Jo-gul confirms he heard, Yunjong adds that he was also a beggar. His first memory is of living alone with his mother, with no relatives or friends. After she passed away, he had no choice but to beg, praying for crumbs to survive. He says the memory of a cold winter day, dying on the street with no one to help, is still as vivid as if it were yesterday. We see a young Yunjong lying in the snow on the cold earth as he explains that, strangely, the hunger was more painful than the cold. After starving for over 10 days, he was ready to kill someone just to steal their food. He admits that if he hadn't been a child, he surely would have become a bandit. If the elder passing by hadn't saved him then, he would have died on that street. To him, the Manhwa sect is his benefactor. They raised and cared for a starving beggar child despite their own difficult circumstances. He explains that whenever he sees hungry people, those old memories return. Because he knows how agonizing that pain is, he couldn't help himself back there. Jo-gul says he understands, but Yunjong questions him. He asks if Jo-gul would still understand even if he had died, if he would still say it was all right in the afterlife. Furious with himself, Yunjong calls his actions foolish beyond measure. He realizes that while helping strangers is a good deed, he should never have forgotten that the safety of his fellow disciples is equally important. He laments even selling the sect's sword, and says that as soon as they return, he will confess his sins to the sect leader. He worries if he will even be allowed to receive the plum blossom sword again. Jo-gul reassures him that he won't be reprimanded for selling the sword, though he might get scolded for his current attitude. When Yunjong asks why, Jo-gul explains that while the sword belongs to the sect, it isn't some holy relic. He begins to imitate Chung Myung, mocking the idea of calling a sword with a plum blossom ornament a sacred artifact, suggesting that if that were the case, they should treat their clothes with the same reverence. These words calm Yunjong slightly. Jo-gul tells him that what matters isn't material assets, but how much he cares for the Manhwa sect. He echoes Chung Myung's philosophy. The important thing isn't avoiding mistakes, but learning from them. He asks if Yunjong has learned his lesson, and with a smile, Yunjong confirms that he has. Yunjong then remembers the moment Elder Hyun Sang took him into his arms when he was on the verge of death, silently apologizing to the elder. Jo-gul tells him to get some sleep since there is much work to be done, specifically finding the Imperial Gromwell and returning home. The scene shifts to Baek Cheon lying in bed. Jo-gul tells Yunjong that while what he did might have been wrong, he is glad Yunjong is that kind of person. Baek Cheon remains silent for a few seconds, sitting up in his bed, before lying back down to sleep. Elsewhere, Chung Myung finally calls out for a bit of water after drinking through the entire day and night. The morning sun is barely beginning to crest over the horizon when Myung finally stumbles back to the estate, his steps heavy with the weight of a night spent matching the Beast Palace Master cup for cup. The other disciples are already waiting, their eyes wide with disbelief as they witness his return. They ask him if he was truly drinking until this ungodly hour, questioning if it even makes sense for a human being to consume that much and remain upright. Iseal doesn't hide her disdain, flatly calling him a drunkard, while Ghoul is more interested in the results, leaning in to ask who won the duel in the end. With a weary, half-lopsided grin, Myung chuckles to himself, declaring that the victory was his. But the taste of triumph is fleeting. Just as he finishes boasting, a messenger from the Beast Palace approaches, his eyes scanning Myung with surprise. Seeing the boy is awake, he informs him that the palace master is already demanding his presence, having ordered that he be brought to the audience chamber the very moment his eyes opened. Myung freezes, his face turning a shade of pale that matches the dawn. He stammers that it can't be possible, wondering how on earth the master is already awake after drinking that much. Cheon seizes the moment to strike at his pride, calling him a loser since he was just claiming victory only seconds ago. Myung lets out a frustrated scream, insisting that this shouldn't be happening as they begin the trek to the palace. The journey is a pathetic sight. Myung is so intoxicated that his legs have turned to jelly, forcing Ghoul and Yunzhang to prop him up on either side just to keep him from collapsing into the dirt. Upon arriving at the palace, they find that the Beast Palace Master isn't exactly the picture of health either. He is slumped on his throne, fast asleep with a face so haggard and hideous it barely looks human. Looking from the master to the staggering disciple, Cheon whispers to himself that the two of them look exactly the same. The Beast Palace Master forces his heavy eyelids open with a visible struggle, groggily asking Myung if he is all right. Myung, refusing to show weakness, lets out a strained laugh and claims he is perfectly fine, even suggesting that they should drink again today since the master seems to be the one having a hard time. The bravado lasts only a second before reality sets in. In a perfectly synchronized display of misery, both men lean over and vomit at the exact same time. One of the palace guards, horrified, suggests that the master should use his inner energy to suppress the alcohol poisoning, while Ghoul yells the same thing at Myung, calling him a punk for not just flushing it out. Both the master and Myung snap back with the same logic, demanding to know why anyone would bother drinking alcohol in the first place if they were just going to wash it away. In that case, they'd rather just drink water. They share a look of sudden, profound respect, acknowledging each other's incredible spirit. Cheon can only watch the spectacle, dryly noting that they seem to be having a wonderful time. The master finally addresses the reason he called for them so early, bringing up the Imperial Gromwell that was mentioned the night before. He explains that someone who overheard their conversation has already made inquiries with the local merchants. Myung is genuinely surprised by the speed of it all, but the master takes pride in the fact that the people of Yunnan are known for being quick and accurate. He promises that the expert will be there soon, and almost on cue, the gates swing open. A merchant enters, bowing deeply as he greets the son of Yunnan. Before the man can even finish his formal titles, the master cuts him off, telling him to skip the formalities and get straight to the Imperial Gromwell. The merchant confirms that the plant known by that name in the Central Plains is actually what the locals call the Divine Spirit Herb. The air in the room turns heavy the moment the name is spoken. Sensing the sudden change in atmosphere, Myung wonders what's going on, and when the master asks if they really came looking for the Divine Spirit Herb, Myung casually agrees, asking if it's really that big of a deal. The master admits that while it shouldn't be a problem in theory, things have certainly gotten complicated. Myung remains skeptical, thinking that as long as it's a trade item, there shouldn't be such a fuss. The master stands up, declaring that there's no point in just talking. He decides to guide them personally to the Divine Reservoir. The announcement causes a wave of panic to ripple through the palace disciples. They whisper in shock, wondering if they heard correctly and questioning why guests are being taken to a place so sacred. One elder even asks if the guests have committed some grave offense to be sent there. The master shuts him down with a terrifying glare, asking if the man is trying to lecture him. Terrified, the disciples drop to their knees, chanting "Long live the palace master" as the group departs. Myung and the others follow the master toward the Divine Reservoir while the elders continue their frantic chanting. The master merely scoffs, calling them pitiful fools. Taking in the scene, Cheon admits he never imagined the Beast Palace would have such a rigid hierarchy, noting that their loyalty seems even more extreme than what is found in the Central Plains. Myung disagrees, pointing out that he's never heard of the Beast Palace treating their leaders with such reverence. In fact, their leaders usually change quite often. He looks at the master's mountain of muscles and suggests the loyalty is born of fear. After all, who would feel like defying a man built like that? Cheon finds it hard to argue. Accompanying them is the master's spirit beast, and Myung notices the little creature has come along as well. He calls the beast over, but it visibly trembles with fear. It's only when Myung gives it a truly menacing, predatory look that the beast decides it's safer to obey, scurrying over to play on his hand while wearing a face of pure desperation. The master is fascinated, remarking that Baek doesn't usually take to strangers. When Myung learns the Marden's full name is Baekjeon, meaning white lightning, he immediately starts teasing Cheon because their names are so similar. Cheon roars at the lunatic to stop. The master goes on to explain that the creature has a fierce temper and is incredibly picky, admitting that even he doesn't always understand its moods. Myung laughs even harder, noting how similar the beast and the swordsman truly are, which only makes Cheon more furious. Despite its small size, the master warns them that this creature stands out among enchanted beasts, capable of making a house-sized tiger freeze in its tracks. Myung is impressed but continues to mock Cheon, calling out to the beast as they move deeper into the wild. As the path vanishes beneath the thicket, Myung asks the Beast Palace Master where they are actually going, questioning if the Divine Reservoir even has a proper path. The Master explains that the Divine Reservoir is the holy land of the Beast Palace. It is a place that is sacred and forbidden at the same time. While it is deeply revered, approaching it without permission is strictly prohibited. No disciple of the Beast Palace is allowed to set foot there, and that rule even applies to the Palace Master himself. However, he reveals that these rules do not apply to outsiders. Since they are not disciples, they may enter at will. Cheon is bewildered by this logic, asking if sacred and forbidden lands aren't usually blocked off specifically to keep outsiders out. The master dismisses the concern, asking if there is a need for such restrictions when animals go in and out freely. When Cheon argues that humans and animals are different, the master concludes that they are no different at all. Humans are simply animals that are a bit smarter. He continues, explaining that Central Plainsmen often mistake their bond with beasts for mere affection. In reality, the Beast Palace doesn't just cherish animals. They believe they are one and the same. Because they don't restrict the movement of animals, they won't block people either. He notes that the land is only holy to their people, and they don't expect others to accept it as such. Cheon, still confused, asks if he isn't worried about the holy land being damaged. The Beast Palace Master replies that a holy land is a holy land regardless of its appearance. Just because it is damaged doesn't mean it loses its sanctity. He claims that clinging to outward appearances is merely the stubbornness of those who don't understand the true meaning of a sacred place. If he considers something holy, that truth doesn't change based on how it looks. Cheon is struck by the unexpected depth of the master's words, but Myung remains skeptical. He asks what the point of calling it a holy land is if they don't bother protecting its state. The Beast Palace Master pauses, thinks about it for a moment, and then bursts into a loud laugh, admitting he hasn't actually thought about it that deeply. The forest grows increasingly dense until it feels as though the thicket has replaced the path entirely. Yoonjong notes that not even a single speck of light can penetrate the canopy anymore. And though they see beasts as large as houses lurking in the shadows, the forest doesn't feel inherently dangerous. Suddenly, a massive tiger leaps out, but instead of an attack, it jumps into the master's arms like a kitten. The master laughs, praising the rascal for how much it has grown. Cheon watches the display, relieved to see that everyone is equal in the face of those massive muscles. Finally, they reach the edge of their journey. The master explains that the divine spirit herb wasn't always so rare, and there were once vast areas where it grew wild. However, 100 years ago, when the demonic cult invaded, they used scorched earth tactics, burning everything in their path. The master's voice fills with a bitter hatred as he wishes he could have seen those bastards burned to death. Since that day, only one place in Yunnan can sustain the herb. He reaches out and parts the thick branches, and as a blinding light hits their eyes, they stand in awe. Hidden within the suffocating darkness of the forest is a lake of crystalline beauty, the divine reservoir. The boys stand in awe of the breathtaking landscape before them. Cheon asks if the divine reservoir is truly the pond where a god resides. The Beast Palace Master stops and explains that he cannot go any further than this. Cheon assumes they are to continue on their own, but the Beast Palace Master tells them to wait, noting that there is one very minor problem. Myung asks in surprise what he means, but the Master tells him it is better to see it for himself than to hear an explanation. He pulls out some meat he brought with him and tosses it toward the edge of the lake. Cheon watches the meat hit the ground with surprise, and almost immediately, the tranquil water begins to churn, creating small ripples. The boys notice the movement and begin to ask what on earth is happening, but before they can finish the sentence, an enormous serpent lunges from the depths and snatches the food. Every single one of them is stunned into silence. Having claimed its prize, the serpent stares at them with crimson, blood-red eyes. In those eyes, the reflections of the boys and the Beast Palace Master are clearly visible. After an intense stare down and finishing its meal, the serpent turns back and submerges into the lake once more. The group is paralyzed by what they just witnessed. A shocked Cheon turns to the Beast Palace Master and shouts, asking what that massive thing was. The master calmly explains that it is the minor problem preventing them from obtaining the divine spirit herb. Myung is equally shaken, screaming about what kind of place this is and why there is a dragon living here. The Beast Palace Master corrects him, saying that dragons are imaginary creatures and that the beast is actually a snake called the ink-scaled blood python. Myung roars back, asking what the difference is since a snake that size might as well be an imaginary creature. The master simply points out that Myung saw it with his own eyes. Myung puts his hand to his head, muttering to himself that he is an idiot for thinking this place was nice, even for a moment. He had wondered why people lived in barren wastelands when fertile land like this existed, but now he realizes no one could possibly reside in such a place. The Beast Palace Master continues his explanation, stating that the ink-scaled blood python is the enchanted beast of the reservoir. Its scales are impervious to blades and even the enhanced energy of a martial master. Furthermore, its strength is so immense that a single flick of its tail can alter the terrain. It is a monster in every sense of the word. Cheon asks if even the palace master is unable to handle it. The master admits he isn't sure and would have to fight it to find out, but as a rule, he cannot enter that area. Since the python never leaves the water, they never cross paths. In other words, the Beast Palace has no reason to enter, and the beast has no reason to leave, making them like neighbors who will never meet. They never had a reason to go out of their way to drive it out or exterminate it. Cheon admits that the logic makes sense. Regardless, the Beast Palace Master warns that it attacks anything that enters the divine reservoir without exception. That is the core of the problem. Cheon realizes that to get the Imperial Gromwell, they must enter the reservoir and deal with that Imugi, or rather, the ink-scaled blood python. The master insists it is still just a minor problem. Myung intervenes, sarcastically screaming about how minor a matter of life and death is. He cynically remarks that life is just a speck of dust anyway, and shouts a Buddhist greeting, Amitba. Cheon quickly corrects him, telling the punk that the correct term is Amateus. Myung yells back, asking if the specific name even matters when they are all going to die. Whether one is a Taoist or a monk, it only takes one hit from those jaws to end it all. He thinks to himself that while the beast might not compare to the refined energy of a Wudong elder or the internal energy of the Tang clan patriarch, it produced a strike of that magnitude with a simple snap of its jaws. It is obvious how strong it would be if it decided to bite for real. He sighs, thinking things were going too well at the Beast Palace, and that his luck could never be that good. Yunjong asks how they are supposed to defeat such a thing. Myung scoffs, asking what he means. To him, it is just a beast, and if he beats it with all his might, it will die like anything else. It has a physical body, and most problems in the world can be solved by smashing the target's head. Xion thinks to himself that Myung is definitely going to die if he tries that. The Beast Palace Master expresses concern, admitting he shouldn't say this as the one who brought them here, but he asks if they will be okay. Myung reassures him, claiming he is a bit stronger than he looks. The master gives a bright smile, saying that such confidence is reassuring and that he will personally take responsibility for making sure Myung's funeral rites are well performed. Myung declares that if a mere beast dares to attack without recognizing who he is, it is going to become snake soup. He notes that the food situation in Kunming wasn't great anyway, and if they catch that thing, the whole city can eat for days. Xion remarks that it is a magnificent solution, truly befitting of a strategist like Zhuge Liang. Myung prepares to head out, but Xion stops him to ask the palace master for the exact location of the imperial Gromwell. The master points to white flowers growing on a cliff across the water, identifying them as the divine spirit herb. Xion warns Myung that defeating the snake isn't the priority. If the herb is damaged during the fight, it's all over. Myung nods, knowing what's at stake. Myung draws his sword, swinging it through the air to test it. He admires the masterwork blade from the Tang clan, noting that the weight and balance are excellent. He reaffirms that no matter how much it rages, the beast is just an animal. He leaps high into the air toward the cliff where the herb grows, shouting that he's really going now. After a high jump, he lands and moves cautiously toward the divine spirit herb. Looking at the calm lake, he tells himself it isn't coming and that he needs to think carefully. His mission is to secure the Imperial Gromwell first. Then he can worry about beating the beast or making soup. He creeps forward slowly so as not to be noticed. Finally, he reaches the herb and begins to pull out 3 or 4 of them. Suddenly, the calm water begins to move. Myung notices the shift just as the enormous serpent rises before him. Looking up from below, Myung realizes in an instant that he is screwed. The serpent's red eyes lock onto him. Myung tries to negotiate, asking if they can just talk after he takes the flowers. The serpent ignores him entirely and lunges at full speed with its mouth wide open. Myung dodges by leaping back as the serpent slams into the ground. Cursing himself for trying to talk to a snake, Myung draws his sword and charges at the beast, noting that it is full of openings. He aims a strike near its head, confident that even an enchanted beast is just an animal and that he couldn't miss a target that size even with his eyes closed. His sword begins to glow with power. Calling the beast a sluggard, Myung unleashes his enhanced sword energy and strikes the snake's head. To his absolute horror, his sword snaps in two. He remembers the words of the Tang leader who gave him the blade, claiming it was a treasure passed down in the clan and given as a token of friendship. As he stares at the broken shards, Myung screams that the treasure was a lie and the man sold him a sword that can't even cut a snake. The serpent contorts its neck and stares Myung in the eye. Myung notes that the beast is cracking its neck just like he used to do, wondering if it has a nasty temper as well. He admits the snake probably doesn't understand human speech, but he asks if they can at least fight fairly after he changes his sword. The serpent flickers its tongue, and Myung weakly suggests that maybe they could just not fight at all. The giant snake lunges violently at Myung, who desperately tries to outrun the massive beast. After dashing forward for several meters, he heavily charges his legs with energy. Just a split second before the python can reach him, Myung leaps high into the air, executing a series of dizzying flips to land squarely on top of the serpent's head. Infusing his sword with a powerful aura, he begins to relentlessly strike the monster's skull over and over, screaming for it to die, to just die, and to finally break. But his desperation is cut short when, once again, his blade shatters into pieces. Staring at his ruined weapon in absolute shock, Myung demands to know if this even makes sense. Whether it is a standard sword technique or the legendary Plum Blossom sword art, the blade actually needs to cut for him to do anything. To him, this feels exactly like trying to fight an armored man with a willow branch. Seizing the opening, the snake whips its massive body and strikes Myung, launching him high into the sky. Myung curses the creature, calling it a son of a snake, but before he can even recover, the python snatches him by the legs with its jaws. Trapped and unable to escape, Myung can only watch as his companions look on in absolute horror. Without a single moment of hesitation, the python uses its immense weight to slam Myung violently into the ground, completely shattering the earth beneath them. The beast does not stop there. It uses its body to smash Myung into the dirt once more, tosses him high into the air, and whips its tail to make direct contact. Using him like a baseball, the snake sends Myung flying hundreds of meters away. Myung crashes hard, tearing up the terrain as he slides to a halt right next to his companions. Fearing the worst, the group rushes toward him, frantically asking if he actually died. But to their surprise, Myung is still very much alive and utterly furious. The four disciples surround him, with Cheon wondering if he is really dead, to which Gul replies by asking if he actually hopes he is. Iseol points out that he is not even twitching, while Yoonjong nervously suggests they should check his pulse first. Suddenly, Myung bolts upright, startling everyone as he screams, asking if that snake bastard really has a death wish. Enraged, he calls it a damn python and vows to turn it into snake soup today, no matter what. Gul skeptically asks how he plans to do that, pointing out that Myung could not even scratch its scales despite the fact that he was using enhanced energy. Nursing his wounds, Myung snaps back, demanding who cares about enhanced energy not leaving a scratch, declaring that he will just make it work because nothing is impossible in this world. As he rants, Iseol presses a handkerchief against his nose to stop the bleeding. The Beast Palace Master chimes in, explaining that the ink-scaled blood python is the most dangerous enchanted beast among the many in Yunnan. He notes they are lucky it possesses a mild temperament and will not harm anyone unless they invade its territory, adding that if it were truly violent, it would be a total disaster. Myung scoffs, asking if he seriously calls that monster mild. When the Beast Palace Master replies that everything is relative, Myung snaps, telling him not to give him that relative crap. The Beast Palace Master continues his explanation, stating that in any case, the ink-scaled blood python shows an excessive obsession with its territory, and it will not tolerate a single stone or blade of grass being touched. Deceiving the python's senses to pluck the divine spirit herb is practically impossible. Myung sarcastically thanks him for the timely warning. Cheon sighs, realizing that in the end, it means they have to defeat the beast to get the Imperial Gromwell. The Beast Palace Master confirms this, admitting he regrets having to say this to the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme from the Central Plains, but the Beast Palace cannot help them with this matter. They must resolve this entirely on their own. Turning to Myung, Cheon suggests it is better to give up on this quest. Myung balks, demanding what he means by giving up. Cheon counters that there is simply no other way, asking how he plans to fight it when his sword cannot even pierce its scales. He points out that Myung was lucky just now, and had he been less fortunate, even he would have become its meal. Deep down, Myung internally admits that Cheon is not wrong. He really could have died if things had gone slightly worse. He wonders how such a creature can even exist. With his current strength, he should be able to cut through everlasting metal, yet he could not even scratch it with his full power enhanced energy. If the sword itself fails, it means no sword technique matters. Breaking his silence, Myung notes that in the end, it all comes down to inner energy. Cheon agrees completely, stating that with Myung's current inner energy, it is impossible, so they should return to the Central Plains and find another way. Surprisingly, Myung agrees, saying fine, let us head back. Cheon is stunned, wondering to himself why Myung is suddenly listening to reason. But then, Myung clarifies that they are only returning to the Beast Palace for now. Cheon groans internally, realizing Myung only heard half of what he said, which figures. Standing up, Myung declares that if he lacks inner energy, he just has to increase it. Forgetting sword techniques, he will just crush the beast with raw power. Glancing back toward the python, He promises that they will meet again soon. Cheon calls out, asking him to hang on and demanding what he is planning now. But Myung completely ignores them as the others rush after him. Watching the scene unfold, the Beast Palace Master smiles to himself, thinking that they are a truly interesting bunch. Once they arrive back at the Beast Palace, Myung marches straight into his room and barks at the others not to come in, slamming the door right in their faces. Left outside, the group is both surprised and worried. Yoonjong asks what they think he has come up with, and Cheon sighs, admitting he has no idea, though Myung is definitely planning something. Inside the privacy of his room, Myung pulls out the Origin Energy Pill and the 1,000 Poison Pill from his belongings. He acknowledges that this is something he had to do eventually, knowing this day would come. He notes that he is getting stronger at a dizzying pace compared to the past. Even if he just keeps training like this, he will catch up to his former level within 30 years. But that is simply not enough. There is no guarantee that nothing will happen during that time. To overcome any situation, he must become stronger as soon as possible, because only then can the Manhwa sect become stronger as well. He has almost finished adapting his martial arts to his current body. Now, as long as he obtains more inner energy, he will naturally be able to perform his techniques from the past. Grabbing the container, Myung concludes that in the end, he will have to rely on pills and elixirs. The moment he opens the container, a vibrant surge of energy erupts from it, forming distinct flowers made of pure mana. Myung mutters that he will not be fooled by the scent, recognizing it immediately as the beauty's tear. This triggers a memory from his past. He remembered sitting down and drinking with an old friend, who asked him if he knew what the best elixir in the Central Plains was. At the time, Myung pondered the question, guessing if it was the Great Rejuvenation Pill or the Taiching Pill, before confidently declaring it had to be the Origin Energy Pill. However, his friend laughed and told him he was completely wrong, claiming those could not even be called real elixirs because they all paled in comparison to what they possessed in their Tang clan. Myung did not buy it for a second, asking what kind of nonsense he was spouting now and since when the 1,000 Poison Pill was considered the best, noting it was practically a laughingstock compared to what other sects held. His friend shook his head, admitting that while that was true for the 1,000 Poison Pill, he was talking about something completely different. He revealed that the Tang clan's true ultimate elixir was called the Beauty's Tear. Surprised, Myung admitted he had never heard of it. His friend smirked, telling him that of course he didn't, because after all, it was actually a poison, one that was incredibly difficult to craft, even for the Tang clan. Skeptical, Myung asked if he was seriously calling a poison an elixir, joking that his friend had been beaten up so much lately that he had finally lost his mind. His friend protested, asking when he ever got beaten up, though he grumbled that if he did, it was always by Myung anyway. Seeing Myung's confusion, his friend explained that the Beauty's Tear was created by combining countless deadly poisons from all across the world. Intrigued, Myung asked if a combination of poisons meant it was some kind of ultimate, deadly toxin. To his surprise, his friend clarified that it was actually not as lethal as one would think. It was originally engineered under the theory that gathering every known poison would make it incredibly toxic, but unexpectedly, it did not produce such a great effect. The various toxins ended up neutralizing one another, and since there was no synergy, it half failed as an actual poison. Confused, Myung questioned why a failed poison would ever be considered an elixir. In response, his friend asked him to define what inner energy truly was. Myung stated it was simply a type of energy. His friend nodded, agreeing that it was exactly that, energy. He pointed out that while animals and plants all held energy suited to their physical size, a martial artist stored that exact energy endlessly within their own body. Myung acknowledged this was true. His friend then continued, explaining that among animals, there were rare creatures capable of harboring vast amounts of energy, known as enchanted beasts. These beasts created a core essence within their bodies to completely transcend the limits of a regular creature, acting just like martial artists. Getting impatient, Myung told him to stop stating the obvious and just get to the point. Smiling, His friend countered that enchanted beasts were not the only animals capable of harboring massive energy, as venomous creatures could do it too. He broke it down, explaining that while a non-poisonous animal harboring energy became an enchanted beast, a poisonous one transformed into a venomous creature. And just as enchanted beasts gathered energy inside their core essence, venomous creatures did something similar. Myung cut in, guessing that they gathered energy directly inside their poison. His friend snapped his fingers, confirming that was exactly right. He argued that otherwise, there would be no reason for their venom to become increasingly more lethal as the animal grew in size. In other words, the venom of a venomous creature was no different from an enchanted pill, locking away all the energy the beast had gathered throughout its entire life. Stroking his chin, Myung muttered that he smelled a total scammer. His friend defended his theory, revealing that the Tang clan had actually made several attempts to absorb the beauty's tear, a concentration of all sorts of poisons, and utilize it as pure inner energy. He then asked Myung if he knew what the ultimate result was, only to immediately answer his own question by stating that they all died, of course, because it was poison after all. Hearing this ridiculous conclusion after such a long explanation, Myung completely lost his temper and grabbed his friend by the collar. Gasping for air, his friend begged him to wait and listen to the very end. He explained that while those test subjects failed, there was a massive effect. The Grand Martial Masters of the Tang clan had to rush in to subdue the man who went completely berserk from the poison, but they were all beaten back and knocked down. Because of that astronomical explosion of inner energy, the entire Tang clan almost collapsed that day. He noted that it happened 200 years ago, clarifying that what the man drank was not some diluted toxin, but the completely raw essence of extreme poison. Because he did something as utterly insane as ingesting all of it without resisting the strain, his body cleanly turned into a bloody puddle. Regardless, the main point was that the concept worked, and its raw effect was so massive that standard enchanted pills could not even come close. The beauty's tear failed to become the world's deadliest poison, but it held the potential to become the world's greatest elixir. Bringing his mind back to the present day, Myung stares down at the substance. Looking at the volatile container in his room, he thinks to himself that this could actually work, if only it could be purified. Staring intently at the beauty's tear, Myung acknowledges that despite talking nonsense as often as he ate, that guy never actually told a lie. In theory, there is certainly nothing wrong with the logic. In theory, at least. The real key to survival is whether he can successfully purify the poison's raw energy while absorbing it. Fundamentally, the way any martial master deals with poison is by somehow expelling it from the body, a rule that even standard purification processes strictly follow. No one would ever do something as utterly insane as trying to absorb lethal poison into their own inner energy. No matter how purified it claims to be, who knows what catastrophic side effects might happen. This realization reminds him of his old friend, Tang Bo, who once insisted that it was entirely possible if Myung was the one doing it. After all, his friend had argued, isn't Taoist-based inner energy renowned for its outstanding purification power in the first place? He had enthusiastically added that if Myung succeeded, he would even be able to crack that heavenly demon bastard's head wide open. Realizing that it might actually be possible precisely because his power is Taoist-based, Myung hesitates for only a few brief moments before declaring that the necessary conditions are fully met. He has the cleanest origin energy pill in the world to help suppress the poison, the 1,000 poison pill to drastically increase his poison resistance, and his own formidable inner energy to back it all up. He reminds himself that he already confirmed through his previous duel at the Tang clan that his resistance to poison is stronger than even the legendary Plum Blossom Sword Supremes. This is an insane gamble that neither his past self nor anyone else in the entire world would ever dare attempt. It is a method completely exclusive to the current him. Though he is taking it now solely because of that snake bastard, this is a dangerous shortcut he has been contemplating for a very long time. The opportunity has finally presented itself, and it is not like he is going to die. Stealing his resolve, Myung takes both the Origin Energy Pill and the Thousand Poison Pill, consuming them simultaneously. Instantly, a violent surge of energy begins flooding into his body, causing his veins to bulge out painfully against his skin while a thick plume of smoke starts pouring from his pores. He wonders if this much preparation should be enough, momentarily questioning if he should just stop right here and go fight that python again. He pauses, staring hesitantly at the beauty's tear, but quickly berates himself, clicking his tongue and demanding since when he became such an absolute coward. He reminds himself that pure absorption is not what matters right now. These preliminary energies must strictly serve as a medium to help absorb the beauty's tear, acting as a vital shield to protect his internal organs from its fatal toxicity. Grabbing the beauty's tear, Myung warns that if this fails, Tang Bo is going to be dead meat, vowing to show him how a man can somehow die twice. He rips off the cap and drinks the entire vial in one single gulp. For a moment, he questions if the dosage was too much and wonders if he should have only taken half. Seeing that there is no immediate effect, he mutters to himself, asking why there is no reaction. It seems fine, at least for now. But suddenly, an immense wall of raw inner energy manifests right before his eyes. He touches it with his fingertips, which instantly begin to burn. Shocked by the sensation, he realizes that this is the raw inner energy contained within the beauty's tear. It is truly astronomical, though most of it is violently impure and highly toxic. However, with such a vast ocean of inner energy available, even if he can only manage to salvage a tiny fraction of it, the power-up will be unprecedented. Beads of sweat begin pouring down his face as the internal strain intensifies. Within moments, Myung screams out, deciding to throw all caution to the wind because it is all or nothing now. He plunges both of his hands deep into the energy, immediately feeling its devastating effects. His hands burn severely and begin to swell up like balloons. He refuses to stop, but the corruption spreads rapidly, causing his entire body to expand. Myung panics, wondering what on earth is happening, joking grimly that he is not some black pig. At this catastrophic rate, his body will explode into pieces, and he will die long before he can even recover a single drop of the inner energy. He realizes that the only sacred place in his body the poison has not yet conquered is his energy core. If that core is taken over, it is absolute game over for him. He vows that he must protect it at all costs, even as his internal defenses slowly crumble away. Myung violently coughs up a spray of dark blood from his mouth. Just when everything seems entirely hopeless, he tightly clenches his fist and commands himself to get it together, gritting his teeth with every ounce of strength he has left. Suddenly, his energy core erupts, shining brighter than ever before as it forcefully drives the venom back. Myung reminds himself to keep this firmly in mind. He is not trying to expel the poison, but rather purify and completely absorb it. As his physical presence expands enormously, he challenges the toxin, roaring to see which one of them will ultimately win this battle. Meanwhile, outside the room, Cheon turns to the others and asks if they can feel something strange happening. Gul replies that it is actually so quiet that it is making him incredibly anxious. He suggests they should go take a quick peek together, reasoning that while Myung strictly told them not to enter, he never explicitly said they couldn't look. Cheon agrees with the logic, but when it comes down to it, only Gul volunteers to do the actual spying. Impatient, Cheon tells him to stop stalling and just do it quickly. Muttering to himself, Gul notes that Cheon's personality has really changed a lot lately. Piercing a tiny hole through the wall of Myung's room, Gul presses his eye against it to spy on his companion. Instantly, he breaks out into a cold sweat at the horrific sight inside. Noticing his pale expression, Cheon starts to ask how it looks and what on earth that guy is doing, but Gul cuts him off entirely, screaming at everyone to run for their lives. Gul bolts first, leaving the rest of the group completely bewildered and startled. Suddenly, the entire house begins to glow with an ominous light. The four disciples scramble desperately to escape the creeping aura of venom, But just then, Myung's inner energy violently detonates. It forms a massive, raging purple tornado that begins to forcefully suck his friends back into the room. Staring in absolute horror, Cheon screams, demanding to know what that thing even is. Shortly after, a brilliant blue energy begins to pierce through the purple vortex. Floating directly in the eye of the storm, Myung is seen levitating in midair, calmly meditating with his legs crossed. The disciples are completely shell-shocked by the sight. Within moments, Myung's vortex begins violently vacuuming everything in the vicinity toward his body. Cheon desperately clings to a structural pillar, screaming at the top of his lungs, calling Myung a damn bastard and asking why he can't just live normally like a regular human being. The rest of the group manages to grab onto the remaining pillars of the house, but the structural integrity fails as the entire building is torn apart and pulled into the vortex. Cheon shrieks that everything is being sucked in, begging someone to stop that lunatic. He screams out to Myung, calling him a crazy bastard, right before the entire group is violently pulled off their feet and swallowed directly into the swirling storm. Following the cataclysmic explosion of energy, the four disciples are violently thrown through the air by the blast wave, crashing headfirst into the surrounding rubble. Myung's unstoppable energy tornado has completely pulverized several houses, leaving behind a massive, swirling cloud of dust. Emerging from the thick haze, Myung steps out completely naked. Without losing a single moment or checking on his friends, he confidently declares that it is time to go and catch that snake. With his legs kicking wildly in the air amidst the wreckage, Cheon screams back that they are the ones who are about to get caught, calling Myung a punk. Furious as he drags himself out of the debris, Cheon demands to know how it is humanly possible that Myung cannot go a single day without causing massive trouble, shouting to know what on earth he did to cause such a disaster. All around them, the scene reveals nothing but the shattered ruins of multiple buildings. Surprised by the view, Myung blinks and looks around at the widespread destruction, genuinely wondering to himself if he was the one who actually did all of this. Cheon barks at him, demanding to know what he plans to do now to fix this, to which Myung merely chuckles, casually stating that it certainly was not intentional. Cheon screams in pure rage, looking as though he wants to beat Myung to a pulp, and orders him to at least try to make a proper excuse. He also tells him to quickly pick something up to cover himself, because his private parts are completely exposed to the world. Looking down at his body, Myung dismisses the concern, arguing that he still has his undergarments on, so he asks what more he is supposed to cover. Citing the ridiculous display, Iceall hands him a robe and bluntly instructs him to wrap it around his body, calling the sight completely unsightly. Immediately after, the guards and martial artists of the Beast Palace arrive on the scene with their swords drawn. One of the furious elders shouts at the top of his lungs, demanding to know what is going on and calling them a bunch of crazy bastards. Cheon and the others are caught completely off guard by their arrival. The elder continues to rage at them, stating that they treated the group with the utmost sincerity as honored guests simply because Myung is the descendant of the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme, yet they dared to commit such an outrageous act of vandalism. He fiercely asks if they have a death wish, while Myung remains entirely unbothered, quietly tying the robe Iceall gave him. Cheon feels completely surrounded and nervously tells the guards to just calm down, offering to first extend their deepest apologies for the mess. Stepping up from behind, Myung places a heavy hand on Cheon's shoulder and tells him to wait, promising that he will handle this situation personally. But before he can even finish his sentence, the sheer momentum of his touch accidentally hurls Cheon several meters across the courtyard, slamming him hard onto the dirt. Myung fails to realize the staggering extent of his newly acquired physical power, leaving everyone on the field, including Myung himself, utterly shocked by the display. Lying on the ground several meters away with blood pouring from his nose, Cheon weakly looks up and curses Myung bitterly. Trying to justify his clumsy action, Myung laughs awkwardly and offers a half-hearted apology, explaining that it is still incredibly difficult for him to control his new strength. Furious, Cheon screams back a curse, declaring that they should just see who dies first today. Myung simply teases his friend, retorting that only Cheon would die in that scenario, telling him to just wait because he will be the one to settle this whole matter. Right at that explosive moment, the Beast Palace Master arrives on the scene. His roaring voice demands to know the reason for all this commotion, unleashing a pressure that practically acts as a physical shockwave. The Beast Palace men instantly drop their weapons and bow, offering their formal greetings to the Palace Master. They quickly report the situation, explaining that they clearly saw a massive dark tornado erupting from this exact spot, a whirlwind that burst out and completely blew away the pavilion and everything else around it. However, the Palace Master simply clenches his fist and barks at them to maintain absolute silence. He then walks straight up to Myung, staring intensely into the young martial artist's face, and asks if he achieved great success during his seclusion. Myung smiles confidently, brushing it off by saying that this much is just a small success, though he notes that his inner energy has increased a bit. Dumbfounded by his casual demeanor, the Beast Palace Master repeats the word small in complete disbelief. Suddenly, the giant man bursts into boisterous laughter, repeating that it is indeed a small success. While delivering heavy, crushing slaps to Myung's shoulder, blows powerful enough to kill an ordinary human being. He declares that a true man's ambition should be at least that grand. He then grabs Myung by the arm, hoisting him high into the air like a trophy, shouting that they must immediately have a drink to celebrate this small success. However, one of the elders nervously objects, calling out to the palace master and arguing that these foreigners are dangerous criminals who just destroyed the Beast Palace's sacred pavilion, insisting that they must be severely punished. The palace master turns on him instantly, demanding to know what he just said. He roars that a valued guest has achieved a major martial breakthrough within the walls of the Beast Palace, and instead of congratulating him, the elder wants him punished just because a few measly buildings got blown away. The elder is left utterly stunned by the outburst as the Beast Palace Master continues his rant, asking since when the Beast Palace became a den for such narrow-minded fools, calling his own men a pathetic lot. Intervening to play the peacemaker, Myung tells the master not to be so angry, casually explaining that the elders only acted this way because their love for the Beast Palace is so great, adding with a smirk that it was technically their fault anyway. But the Beast Palace Master scoffs at the idea, asking what fault he could possibly be talking about. He loudly asserts that when a true martial artist trains, such collateral damage is bound to happen, proudly recalling that he blew away several of his own training grounds during his younger days. Seizing the perfect opportunity, Myung childishly sticks his tongue out at the frustrated elder behind the master's back. The Beast Palace Master loudly orders a grand feast to be held in celebration, but Myung stops him, stating that they shouldn't do it right now. First, he insists they go catch that python, promising that they can have a proper drink later with fresh snake soup serving as their side dish. The Beast Palace Master breaks into another round of loud, appreciative laughter. Shortly after, the group heads directly toward the serpent's territory, cutting a path through the dense shadows of the forest. As they march, Cheon questions Myung, skeptically asking if he really managed to increase his inner energy. Myung explains that it was only a little, just a small amount. He admits it did not increase as much as he had originally hoped, but since he did not die in the process, he considers the gamble an absolute win. Cheon retorts that inner energy is not like piece of taffy, meaning a person cannot just stretch it out whenever they feel like it. He then presses further, asking what Myung meant by not dying in the process, demanding to know if someone can actually lose their life while trying to increase their inner energy reserves. Myung simply replies that this time around, the method he chose to use was a bit dangerous. Cheon sighs in absolute exhaustion, admitting that he honestly does not understand Myung anymore. As they continue their trek through the wild terrain, Myung reflects internally on his harrowing experience. He realizes that the toxicity and raw inner energy of the beauty's tear completely surpassed his wildest imagination. He notes that if he had made even the smallest mistake, or if his own inner energy had been slightly less pure, his body would have literally exploded into pieces. He analyzes that, as expected, only a very small fraction of pure power could be extracted from the volatile toxin. But fortunately, because the initial amount inside the vial was so incredibly vast, he still managed to basically double his entire energy reserves. With this much power at his disposal, he knows he will not have to struggle because of a lack of inner energy for quite a while. Drawing his sword with newfound confidence, he tells himself that he will finally show that lowly beast the true price for touching a human being. They finally arrive at the edge of the lake where the giant serpent resides. Noticing the broken weapon in his companion's hand, Ghoul points out that the sword is still snapped clean in half from their previous encounter. But Myung completely dismisses the concern, stating that against this opponent, the state of the blade simply does not matter. Stepping right up to the edge of the shore, Myung takes a deep, grounding breath and screams with every ounce of his newly amplified strength, commanding the beast to come out. Everyone turns their eyes anxiously toward the water, holding their breath. The once calm surface of the lake begins to violently churn and boil until a massive, terrifying silhouette starts emerging from the dark depths. It is the giant python, rising directly in front of Myung with its crimson eyes glowing menacingly in the light. Preparing himself for the ultimate clash, Myung locks eyes with the monster and declares that it is dead meat today, vowing to turn it into nothing more than snake soup. Myung lunges directly at the massive serpent, channeling his energy into his feet to literally walk on water, charging straight toward his target. The serpent watches him approach, waiting for the perfect moment. It throws open its jaws, exposing razor-sharp teeth while its crimson eyes glow brighter than ever before, launching itself straight at Myung, who meets its charge head-on. The beast's mouth is absolutely colossal compared to Myung, clearly intending to swallow him whole in a single bite. As the serpent snaps its jaws shut, Myung deftly evades the strike with a series of sideways flips. He immediately charges his sword, infusing the blade with a brilliant, glowing aura, calls the creature a bastard, and strikes it directly on the head. The serpent's red eye widens in absolute shock, and its sudden recoil catches Myung's friends completely by surprise, amazed that the strike actually worked. Myung maintains his relentless pressure on the creature's head, pouring even more power into the assault. The force is so immense that the serpent can feel it deep within, its eye on the verge of exploding. Standing on the shore, Yoonjong asks if he just heard a strange sound. Myung continues his downward drive, nearly touching the water's surface. Cheon notes with shock that the attack is working, realizing that even though Myung couldn't pierce the scales, the pure impact is definitely getting through. Gathering all its remaining strength, the serpent manages to force its head back up. Myung charges his next strike, telling the beast to stay still, and hammers its head once more, slamming the thrashing serpent deep into the water as it screams out in sheer agony. To Myung's utter surprise, however, the serpent emerges completely unscathed, staring him down with its massive, glowing red eyes. With blinding speed, the beast snatches Myung out of the air with its jaws and repeatedly slams him violently against the ground, thrashing him back and forth. His friends watch the brutal scene unfold with mounting dread. Cheon wonders to himself if Myung is going to die at this rate, realizing that this battle has truly turned into a contest of who dies first. Gripping the hilt of his sword, Cheon declares that if Myung can't handle the ink-scaled blood python alone, they will have to rush in together to save him. The serpent lifts its massive head again, revealing that Myung is still desperately clinging to its jaws. Cheon lets out a sigh of relief, realizing he is not dead yet. Seeing the human still attached to its snout, the serpent violently shakes its head from side to break Myung's grip, but Myung refuses to let go. Changing its strategy, the serpent suddenly surges toward a specific part of the shore. Shion looks on in absolute horror, realizing the direction it is heading, and screams out in panic for it to stop, warning that the beast is heading right for the Imperial Gromwell, terrified that the very last Imperial Gromwell is about to be destroyed. Realizing the danger, Myung instantly coats his legs in a protective aura. The serpent slams him down again, and Myung desperately tries to halt its momentum to prevent the destruction of the rare herbs. The beast forces him directly into the Imperial Gromwell patch, while Myung fights with everything he has to hold it back, but falling debris and crushing weight destroy some of them anyway. Shion cries out in absolute despair, shouting that if it falls, it is the absolute end. Pushing past his limits, Myung unleashes one final burst of strength to deflect the beast, charging up a massive counter-strike while yelling that this place is off limits and telling the creature to stop. His blow connects flawlessly, blasting the massive serpent away and sending it crashing back into the lake. Breathing heavily, Myung declares that it is time to end this once and for all. The serpent is equally determined to finish the fight. It begins to transform, unleashing a deafening, earth-shattering roar that forces Myung's friends to tightly cover their ears. Watching the creature's terrifying transformation from afar, the Beast Palace Master can't help but crack a sinister smile. As the serpent roars again, Myung notes that something about its energy has completely changed, asking the beast if it is finally getting heated up too. Pointing his snapped sword, now broken clean in half, directly at the monster, he warns it that this is exactly why it should have picked its fights more carefully. The serpent responds by baring its razor-sharp teeth and preparing for a final, lethal charge. Deciding to put everything on the line, Myung resolves to meet force with pure force. A massive blue aura erupts around his body, rapidly shifting into a deep, crimson red as his eyes burn with a matching scarlet hue. He tells himself it is strength against strength. As the red aura completely envelopes him, he feels the sheer weight of the technique, comparing it to holding up a massive supporting pillar or halting the flow of a raging river. His sword begins to vibrate violently, the resonance so intense it feels as if the blade might burst from the inner energy surging through his arm. Wherever the sword's vibration passes, a single plum blossom petal manifests in the air. On its own, a single petal is infinitely fragile, but gathered in countless numbers, they possess the power to block even the flow of a river. Myung's broken blade glows with a brilliant red light, completely surrounded by a storm of crimson petals. He hurls himself at the serpent, unleashing the devastating 24-movement Plum Blossom sword technique. Falling Plum Blossom River split, striking the beast dead on and causing it to erupt in a fountain of blood. Myung sticks the landing, panting heavily as he admits to himself that the technique isn't perfect yet and the power feels half-assed, but the sheer impact of the falling Plum Blossom River split must have completely torn up the creature's internal organs by now. Watching the heavy flow of blood pouring from the beast, Myung mocks its stiff, wobbling head. He points his blade at the monster once more, telling it that it's time to finish this, commanding it to come at him. But before he can even finish his sentence, the serpent abruptly turns and flees, diving deep into the lake. It vanishes from sight completely, leaving Myung entirely speechless. On the shore, Shion cheers in amazement, shouting that Myung actually won. Ghoul laughs hysterically in pure relief, exclaiming that he actually defeated it, though he begins to comment on the incredible sword technique Myung used at the very end. Before Ghoul can even finish his thought, Myung decides that this fight is far from over. With a sudden headfirst dive, he plunges right into the lake after the beast, leaving his companions completely dumbfounded by his reckless actions. Swimming furiously to catch up to the fleeing monster, Myung fumes to himself, cursing the snake for trying to run away after putting him through so much trouble. He rails against the damned snake for having absolutely no sense of business ethics, swearing that if it made him suffer this much, it needs to leave something valuable behind before it dies. Driven by pure greed, he screams underwater for its core essence, demanding that the beast hand over its core essence. As Myung dives deeper into the dark, crushing depths of the water, he declares that he is absolutely not leaving without a profit. To him, the Imperial Gromwell is no longer the main issue. After the creature made him suffer this much, it is only polite for the beast to hand over its core essence. He makes it clear that if it refuses to give it up, he will take it by force, claiming that even the sacred Taoist scriptures dictate this is how the world works. Hearing this completely absurd justification, his former leader asks what kind of nonsense he is spouting. But Myung presses on, shouting into the abyss, asking if the creature truly thinks it can hide just because it is lurking in the dark. He boasts that he can see everything, calling it nothing more than future snake soup. Suddenly, Myung spots something charging directly toward him through the murky water, a rapid barrage of high-velocity water projectiles. He miraculously manages to dodge the oncoming assault, but the monster immediately follows up with a massive water bomb, violently blasting Myung backward and sending him flying through the lake. Stabilizing himself against the current, Myung grumbles internally, realizing the beast is trying to force him out of the water without engaging in a direct fight. He mocks the creature's intellect, thinking that while it might be pretty smart for a snake, it still possesses a completely smooth brain. Drawing his weapon, the blade begins to glow with a brilliant, radiating light underwater as he hurls himself forward at terrifying speed. As he closes the distance, he finally spots his target, triumphantly telling himself that he found the bastard. However, the serpent whips its massive tail, charging up a heavy, devastating blow that connects dead on, slamming Myung violently into the deep floor of the lake. When the underwater dust settles, we see that Myung managed to withstand the impact and drive his sword deep into the serpent's massive body. The giant snake screeches in agonizing pain, thrashing wildly in every direction to break his grip, but Myung holds on for dear life, shouting that he will never let it go. Changing its strategy, the serpent pivots and points its massive head directly at him. Myung catches the movement and launches himself straight into a head-on collision, his sword glowing brighter than ever. He boldly proclaims that no matter how much a snake tries to use its head, its brain remains completely smooth. The two clash face to face, and Myung successfully delivers another powerful strike right to the creature's skull, drawing fresh blood. With his sword firmly embedded in the serpent's head, Myung fiercely commands it to hand over its core essence. However, oxygen suddenly runs dangerously low, forcing him to back off and gain some distance. Realizing he can no longer drag this fight out, he knows he must finish it right here and now. Myung drops into a lethal stance, pointing his sword at the beast, acknowledging that it was indeed a strong opponent. A fierce, crimson aura begins to envelop Myung, dyeing the surrounding lake a deep blood red as the serpent bleeds heavily from the wound he inflicted. Ready to unleash his final strike, Myung tells the beast that if it is reborn in the next life, it should never mess with humans and should live quietly. But right before he can deliver the killing blow, Myung notices something unexpected. Meanwhile, the scene shifts over to his friends, who are frantically harvesting every single available flower, ensuring they do not leave a single one behind. Cheon barks orders at the group, telling them to pull them out, to rip out everything that looks remotely similar. Ghoul eagerly chimes in, warning them not to just pull the stalks, but to dig them out entirely with the soil. Turning to Yunjong, Ghoul snaps that he is doing it wrong, instructing him to dig up the entire surrounding area just like this. After clearing out the patch, they check to see if that is everything. Confirming they have successfully gathered them all with not a single root left behind, they stuff the massive harvest into a bag. Cheon ties the sack securely, declaring that they are good to go. Slinging the heavy sack over his shoulder, Cheon warns his friends that they need to leave quickly before that ink-scaled monster, or whatever it is, comes back. However, he cuts his sentence short as he violently collides into what feels like a solid brick wall. In reality, it is the Beast Palace Master standing right in front of them. The formidable master directly orders them to hand it over, specifically, the sack containing the divine spirit herb. The young martial artists are completely stunned by his sudden demand. Extending his hand, The master firmly tells them to give it here. Taken aback, Cheon wonders to himself why this man is suddenly demanding the Imperial Gromwell after remaining entirely quiet this whole time. Cold sweat begins to pour down his face as a dark thought crosses his mind, wondering if the master has turned against them. Instinctively, he pulls the sack behind his back, a defensive movement that leaves the Beast Palace master looking perplexed. The master asks if he has no intention of giving it up. Cheon hesitates, stammering out a weak response, which leads the Beast Palace master to realize that the youth are openly doubting his integrity. Cheon bites his lip anxiously, realizing that if this powerful man truly has ulterior motives, it would be utterly impossible for them alone to protect the Imperial Gromwell. In fact, it might even be impossible for them to escape with their lives. Observing their sheer panic, the Beast Palace master sighs deeply, calling them pathetic fools for being so incredibly nervous. He questions them, asking if they honestly believe that taking just one sack would be a challenge for him if he actually had such malicious intentions. He reassures them that he has absolutely no intention of stealing the herb or harming them, so they should just hand it over. After a tense moment, Cheon finally surrenders the bag, apologizing and explaining that these plants are incredibly important to his sect. Taking the sack, the Beast Palace master notes that he understands. He opens it, pulls out a few of the herbs, and begins carefully replanting them back into the exact spot they were just uprooted from. Confused by his actions, Cheon hesitantly asks the palace master what he is doing. The Beast Palace master replies by reminding him that the sole reason they came all this way in person was to obtain this divine spirit herb. Cheon confirms that this is correct, just as he mentioned before. The master then asks if this small amount is truly enough for their needs. Thinking to himself, Cheon admits that it might indeed not be enough. In fact, the more they have, the better, and the ultimate result would be securing a continuous, steady supply for the future. The Beast Palace master explains that if they completely uproot all the divine spirit herbs here, no one knows where or when it might ever grow wild again. It is far wiser to leave some planted in a similar environment so they can cultivate and grow steadily. Cheon realizes the deep wisdom in his words and agrees that it is certainly true. After carefully replanting several stalks, the Beast Palace master points out that this particular spot is not actually part of the sanctuary since it lies entirely outside its boundaries. They could never touch it before due to the terrifying ink-scaled blood python guarding the area. But now that they have successfully driven the beast away, the Beast Palace master offers to secure the divine spirit herb for them and send it directly to the Manhwa sect whenever they reach out. Tying the bag back up with a generous amount of the divine herb still inside, the master hands it back over, asking if that arrangement wouldn't be far more convenient for them as well. As Cheon takes the sack, he is deeply moved, wondering to himself if this Grand Master is truly willing to go that far for their sake. The Beast Palace master imparts a final lesson, stating that greed is what ultimately ruins everything. To him, living in perfect harmony with nature is no different from realizing the deep wisdom of taking only what is needed right now and leaving the rest to flourish. Touched by his profound philosophy, Cheon tells the palace master that he has learned a truly great lesson today. The master breaks out into a hearty laugh, amusedly repeating the word lesson. Right at that moment, Myung breaks through the water's surface, gasping desperately for air after spending so much time submerged without breathing. Still catching his breath, he complains loudly, stating he honestly thought he was going to suffocate to death down there. As Myung tries to wring out his soaked clothes, Gul approaches him and eagerly asks about the core essence. Myung bluntly replies that there wasn't one. He then vents his extreme frustration, yelling out in annoyance that all that brutal, hard work was entirely for nothing. Gul is left completely stunned, wondering how it is even possible for such a massive, enchanted beast to not possess a single core essence. Turning around, Myung spots the sack of divine spirit herbs that Cheon is holding and asks if they managed to harvest all of them. Cheon clarifies that they only took half, leaving the rest safely planted in the ground. Hearing this, Myung casually notes that it is perfectly fine then. Myung turns on his heel and declares that they are finished here, commanding everyone to move out. A surprised Ghoul questions his decision, asking if he is seriously giving up on looking for the core essence after exerting so much effort to subdue the creature. He argues that with a monster of that massive size, there is absolutely no way it didn't have one. Infuriated, Myung snaps back and screams that he already told him there wasn't one. He insists there was no core essence, absolutely nothing, aggressively suggesting that maybe the snake pulled it out itself and hid it somewhere. Bemused by the sudden outburst, Ghoul asks why on earth he is getting so incredibly angry. Myung shoves Ghoul forward, barking at him to get moving and hurry up, stating that he doesn't even want to look at this wretched place anymore. Cheon watches this display in surprise, wondering why Myung is suddenly in such a desperate rush to leave. Myung fires back, telling Cheon that he can stay and live here if he likes, but he is heading straight back to Manhwa. Cheon sighs at his antics, noting that he is truly unbelievable. With that, the entire group heads back to the Beast Palace along the same path they came. Since their original objective was always the Imperial Gromwell, there isn't much lingering regret over the missing core essence. Either way, their dangerous mission at the Divine Reservoir is officially complete. At the entrance of the forest leading back to the Beast Palace, Iceall pauses and looks back, noticing the giant serpent slowly emerging from the water just as they are leaving. Shocked, she quietly observes that it is still alive, deeply wondering why Myung chased it so relentlessly, as if he was truly going to kill it if he intended to spare it all along. But then, her eyes catch sight of smaller movements on the serpent's massive body, several tiny snakelets clinging to their mother. Realization hits her as she softly murmurs to herself about the babies, finally understanding why Myung spared the creature. Seeing her lingering at the edge of the woods, Myung calls out to her, asking if she is coming along. Iceall replies that she is on her way. Taking one final, gentle look at the giant python resting peacefully with her offspring, she softly whispers to them to grow up well and never harm humans. After gathering their supplies at the lake, the group returns to their quarters. Cheon turns to the others and asks if they are finished preparing to leave. They explain that there was not much to prepare, and Ghoul adds that all their luggage fits in the bags they brought, save for one sack of Imperial Gromwell. Guarding this sack is Myung, who acts like a watchdog, snarling and baring his sharp teeth at anyone who gets close. When Ghoul asks why Myung is behaving this way, Cheon explains that Myung claims the item is more precious than their lives and has threatened to bite anyone who approaches. Cheon sighs, remarking on how cute Myung is being, but a startled Ghoul warns him not to say that even as a joke, fearing Myung might take it seriously. Deciding not to delay any further, Cheon announces that they should go pay their respects to the palace master before heading out, noting that he has shown them great kindness and they owe him a proper goodbye. Crossing his arms, Myung mulls over the situation to himself. He thinks they should indeed pay their respects, especially since the palace master is essentially holding the Imperial Gromwell hostage. He finds the man surprisingly clever, a trait that doesn't quite match his physical appearance. It is a shrewd move to use the Imperial Gromwell, which is common to them, to build a foundation for a lasting relationship with the Manhwa sect, and luckily, it turns out to be a win for them as well since they have secured a supplier. As Yunjong approaches, Myung immediately snarls at him like a wild animal. Yunjong snaps back that he is not trying to steal it and reminds Myung that he is from the Manhwa sect as well. Yunjong then calls him by name, insisting he has something important to discuss. Myung asks why they would even bother, and Yunjong tells him to think about it carefully. Myung argues that they aren't blocking the trade route to Yunnan or preventing anyone from leaving. So if the locals refuse to trade, there is no reason for them to be the ones to persuade them. When Yunjong hesitates, Myung interrupts to ask if he is going to talk about people starving again. Myung insists that the situation is none of their business, and while he feels bad for the locals, there is a limit to what they can do. Ghoul intervenes, noting that it is not just about compassion. If it were, he would have stopped Yunjong before he even spoke to Myung. Ghoul argues that the matter is not that simple. It is profitable. Myung watches him, unimpressed, but Ghoul presses on, explaining that since the people of Yunnan are starving, they could buy food and exchange it for their tea to sell, yielding a massive profit. Myung interrupts to finish the thought. They would secure the tea trade rights for Yunnan, earn as much as one of the 10 great merchant guilds of the Central Plains, and use the Ghoul family as the agent, effectively killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Stunned that Myung had already figured it out, Ghoul is met with a dry remark from Myung, who wonders if Ghoul takes him for a fool. Myung then explains that while he understands their logic, they are only seeing the surface and missing the bigger picture. He points out that their priority is maintaining a good relationship with the Beast Palace, not just making money in Yunnan. He insists there is no need to force something the palace hates just because they think it is for their own good. While money is important, he reminds them there are other things in this world that must be prioritized first. Yunjong turns to Ghoul, remarking that he thought Myung would go crazy at the mention of money, and Ghoul agrees, shocked that those words actually came out of such a money grubber's mouth. Myung waves them away, telling them to discard their useless thoughts and finish packing. Yunjong refuses to give up, begging Myung to at least bring it up once. When Myung ignores him, Yunjong insists that the palace master holds him in high regard. He explains that the Beast Palace blocks the tea trade because they dislike the people of the Central Plains, but if Myung, someone they actually respect, steps forward, it could lead to a better future for everyone. Myung finally sighs and agrees to mention it, but only that. As Yunjong cheers, Myung adds that they must go out and prepare something first. Both Yunjong and Ghoul look surprised by his demand. With a grin, Myung tells them it is nothing much, just an outfit to make negotiations go a bit smoother. A few moments later, they return with feathers, twigs, a robe, and sewing thread. Cheon watches, bewildered, and asks why they are doing this. When Myung defends his choice, a messenger knocks on the door to inform them that the palace master is looking for Taoist Myung. Myung eagerly tells the messenger that the timing is perfect. He slams the door shut, ignoring the messenger, and asks if he is wearing the outfit correctly, even borrowing Cheon's hero headband. When he finally exits to meet the palace master, Ghoul complains that Myung worked them to death to get the costume ready without offering a single word of thanks. Yunjong calls him an ungrateful brat, while Cheon warns that once they return to the Central Plains, this entire ordeal must remain an absolute secret. If the Jeagle clan finds out, they will surely come after them with swords. Upon arriving at the palace master's residence, the messenger announces their arrival. As Myung enters, the palace master bursts into loud laughter, remarking that Myung looks exactly like a scholar in his makeshift outfit, complete with poorly sewn robes and a fan made of feathers. Myung claims he put some effort into the look, thinking to himself that one must dress the part for negotiations in Yunnan. Just then, a feather irritates his nose, causing him to sneeze. He sits down, and the palace master explains that he called him because he has a serious matter to discuss. The palace master takes a breath and admits that it feels awkward to say, but given that the Beast Palace provided many conveniences to the Manhwa sect, he has a favor to ask. Myung is surprised, and the palace master confirms this is a formal request from the Beast Palace and from himself, Mengso. Myung pauses, asking for clarification on the name, and when the palace master confirms his name is Mengso, Myung is taken aback by the meaning of the name Small. The palace master explains that he was so tiny when he was born that his father gave him that name, leaving Myung to wonder internally if the man was fed dangerous pythons as an infant. Mengso adjusts his posture and repeats that this is a serious request. Myung, watching the shift in the palace master's demeanor, becomes nervous, fearing the matter is so grave that he won't even get a chance to bring up the tea trade. He thinks he should have spoken first, but tells the palace master to proceed. The palace master admits it is a difficult request and begins to hesitate. Myung, increasingly panicked internally, tries to interrupt, but Mengso finally speaks. He asks if the Manhwa sect could step forward and set up trade with Yunnan. Myung is left stunned, asking if they truly want the Manhwa sect to handle the tea trade. The palace master begs for his help, insisting it must be them. Left in shock, Myung thinks to himself, wondering how the situation turned into exactly the favor he was planning to ask for. The chapter opens with the men of the Beast Palace gathered in the grand hall of the Beast Palace Master. Alongside them stand Myung and the rest of the Manhwa disciples. Sensing the heavy, tense atmosphere, Cheon turns to Myung and asks what on earth is happening. Myung calmly assures him that it is nothing and tells him it will all be over soon, so he should just sit back and watch. Suddenly, the men of the Beast Palace begin beating their war drums with thunderous force. One of them screams at the top of his lungs, announcing to the entire hall that the king of all beasts, the palace master of the Beast Palace, has officially arrived. With an overwhelming and powerful aura, the mighty master enters the hall. The elders instantly drop to their knees, raising their arms high into the air as they shout in unison, wishing long life to the Beast Palace, declaring it immortal and destined to rule the entire world. The formidable Meng so strides forward and takes his seat upon his massive throne. Myung walks directly toward him, offering a formal greeting to the palace master. Looking down from his high seat, the Beast Palace Master questions the young disciple of the Manhwa sect, asking what exact reason drove him to request this audience. To everyone's absolute shock, Myung drops straight to his knees before the ruler. He humbles himself completely, announcing that he, a mere lowly Taoist, has a desperate plea for the great palace master, begging him from the bottom of his heart to show vast mercy and not reject his request. His companions look on in utter bewilderment, completely stunned by Myung's uncharacteristically submissive behavior. Meng So acknowledges his lineage, stating that as a descendant of the legendary Plum Blossom Sword Supreme, Myung is fully qualified to make a request of him. He commands the disciple of the Manhwa sect to go ahead and speak, promising that he will personally listen to the plea before deciding whether or not to grant it. In response, Myung slams his head hard against the floor in a deep bow, loudly proclaiming that he is simply moved to tears by the master's incredibly wise decision. The scene shifts back to a short while earlier, back when the two leaders were speaking privately. Meng So admitted to Myung that he knew this was by no means an easy task. However, he emphasized that it absolutely could not be anyone else but the Manhwa sect, before asking if he could inquire about a few things first. Myung readily agreed, telling him to ask as much as he liked. Myung fired the first question, asking if Meng So was fully aware that the current situation in Yunnan was incredibly dire. Meng So retorted that Myung must have taken him for a blind man, pointing out that since he had working eyes, of course he knew the tragedy unfolding in his lands. Seizing the opening, Myung pressed further, asking why the master had done absolutely nothing to fix it until now. Meng So sighed, acknowledging that in the eyes of an outsider, it must have looked as though he was deliberately blocking all trade between Yunnan and the Central Plains. Meng So explained the harsh truth, revealing that it was not his decision at all. Such a restrictive policy had been carved into law by his predecessors, and not even someone of his status could simply overturn their sacred ancestral will at his own personal discretion. He added that Myung would easily understand the burden if he were the one sitting in that position. Nodding slowly, Myung muttered that he saw the master's point, while his mind began racing to analyze the political landscape. He realized that true authority within a martial power did not stem from raw physical strength alone, especially in a sacred place that prided itself so deeply on its historical legacy like the Beast Palace. Even if someone possessed the monstrous power of the current palace master, the exact moment he showed disrespect toward his ancestors and denied their historical decisions, his authority among his people would instantly plummet to rock bottom. Myung deduced that if that happened, absolutely no one would want to follow him anymore. A leader with fractured authority could never hope to command a martial organization properly. Furthermore, considering the disastrous state Yunnan had already been pushed to, the moment the palace master lost his grip on power and the Beast Palace began to shake, there was no telling what kind of chaotic rebellion might explode. Meng So broke his train of thought, adding that the bitter public sentiment in Yunnan did not welcome the Central Plains either. He explained that if he were to forcibly resume trade right now, countless furious citizens would instantly rise up in violent protest. Shocked by this cultural wall, Myung asked if the people would truly protest even though their very livelihoods and survival were at stake. Meng So replied somberly that humans do not live by bread alone, and that sometimes there are things far more important than what goes into one's mouth. He admitted it must be incredibly difficult for a Central Plains martial artist to understand, but explained the deep-seated trauma of his people. As if being brutally betrayed in the past were not painful enough, they had also been despised, looked down upon, and branded as subhuman barbarians by the Central Plains for generations. They were treated little better than wild animals, while the Central Plains unilaterally hated their sacred customs, mocking them as primitive. Because of that agonizing history, Meng So declared that no matter how hungry his people became, they could never bring themselves to be the first to bow their heads and yield to their abusers. He noted that if the other side had simply apologized first, there might have been a massive shift in public sentiment. However, the imperial government had absolutely no interest in Yunnan, and those arrogant bastards from the 10 great sects who rightfully owed them a desperate apology refused to even show their faces. Under such impossible conditions, Meng So asked what more he could possibly do. Myung took this all in, realizing the tragic trap the ruler was caught in. He noted to himself that because Meng So was completely paralyzed by the rigid decisions of his predecessors and the festering, hateful public sentiment, he could not step forward directly. Instead, he had been forced to wait and endure the suffering until it reached this breaking point. Yet, Myung realized that this meant that even now, the master had no clear, viable solution. Meng So continued his confession, stating that although he was not a king, he still carried the sacred duty to feed the starving people of Yunnan. However, the harsh local environment simply did not produce enough grain to sustain them. To survive, they had to purchase food from external territories, and while they had managed to temporarily solve the crisis through trade with the western region, they had now hit a hard limit. It was precisely in the midst of this fatal dead end that the Manhwa sect suddenly appeared. Myung paused, his brilliant mind connecting the dots. He realized with a jolt that the warm, overwhelming welcome they had received upon arrival was entirely because the master had an ulterior motive from the very beginning. He thought to himself that he had completely misjudged the giant, having pegged him as just a good-natured, simple-minded fool who laughed everything off. Reading his expression, Meng So told him there was no need to look at him with such a shocked face, assuring him that he had not spun some grand, evil conspiracy. He explained that usually, anyone who saw his massive physique and heard his booming voice automatically assumed he must be an incredibly dull, brainless fellow. However, he pointed out that if he had a slightly more ordinary, smaller body, Myung's thoughts about him would be completely different right now. Myung secretly labeled the master a cunning fox. He realized that while he initially thought the man was a simple bear, he was actually a brilliant fox wearing a massive bear's skin, marveling at how someone of that sheer size could possess such a sharp intellect. Suddenly, Meng So lowered his head in a deeply humble gesture. He begged Myung for his aid, professing his deep love for the people of Yunnan, whom he described as rough but incredibly simple folk. He confessed that he could no longer bear the agonizing sight of his people starving to death. Having done everything humanly possible in his own way, he had finally reached his absolute limit. So he implored Manhwa to help him, promising that it would certainly not be a losing business deal for them either. Myung casually responded that he now roughly understood how the entire situation was playing out. He then began to chuckle deviously under his breath, prompting a nervous Meng So to ask if the task would be too difficult for him to pull off. Masking his absolute euphoria, Myung put on a serious face and claimed that it was indeed an incredibly difficult task, all while throwing a wild celebration inside his own mind. Internally, Myung cheered that if a person lives kindly, they truly receive endless blessings. He laughed hysterically to himself, realizing that just because he happened to save that one little ink-scaled snake earlier, a massive, legendary blessing had fallen right into his lap. He gleefully decided that he did not even care about the mythical core essence anymore, because he was about to eat high-quality rice heavily sprinkled with pure gold dust. Misunderstanding Myung's dramatic pause, Meng So sighed and stated that if it was truly too difficult, it could not be helped. He expressed his deep shame but muttered that he would just have to find another way to save his people. Before the master could even finish his sentence, Myung loudly interrupted him, yelling for him to hold on. In a flash of pure excitement, Myung leaped right onto the meeting table, shouting at the top of his lungs. He demanded to know whether difficulty even mattered in a situation like this, declaring fiercely that the only important thing that mattered was that the Manhwa sect and the Beast Palace were ultimate friends. Myung kept riding the wave of momentum, proclaiming that he could not even begin to imagine the profound sorrow Meng So must have suffered all this time because of those absolute bastards from the 10 great sects, who rightfully deserved to be beaten to death. Meng So's eyes lit up, and he loudly agreed that Myung was completely right. Myung continued his passionate speech, shouting that, come to think of it, there was probably no other group in the entire world that understood Yunnan's painful isolation as deeply as the Manhwa sect. He reminded the master that Manhwa had risked its entire existence and sacrificed everything to defeat the evil demonic cult, only for the ungrateful Central Plains to completely forget how to show a single shred of gratitude. Meng So fiercely validated his words, shouting that it was exactly true, and slamming the 10 great sects as people who did not know the meaning of showing appreciation. Myung declared that they were officially in the exact same boat. Meng So enthusiastically agreed, admitting that hearing about the tragic history of the Manhwa sect had filled the Beast Palace with immense righteous anger as well. Myung told him not to worry about a single thing anymore, promising that he would deploy the absolute entirety of the Manhwa sect's vast power to sell the Yunnan tea for them, swearing that they would overcome these brutal hardships and adversities side by side. Overwhelmed with emotion, Meng So gasped, asking if Myung was truly willing to go that incredibly far for their sake. He emotionally declared that if he did this, the entire region of Yunnan would forever consider the Manhwa sect its greatest savior and benefactor. Myung instantly waved off the grand title, stating that being called a benefactor did not matter at all. He immediately whipped out a piece of official paper and a thick writing brush, turning to the master and demanding concrete evidence. He explained that while a relationship built purely on trust and faith was beautiful, for such a lucrative relationship to endure for a long time, there absolutely had to be clear, legally verifiable evidence left behind. A completely taken aback Meng So questioned what kind of evidence he meant. Myung casually brushed it off as a minor detail, explaining it was just a tiny, simple promise to grant the Manhwa sect the absolute, exclusive rights to the entire Yunnan tea trade for at least the next 10. No, make it the next 100 years. He clarified that it would be a binding promise ensuring that absolutely no other merchant guild in the world could trade within Yunnan for those 100 years. He insisted that they should leave such trivial details in writing, noting that once the master stamped his official handprint on the document, absolutely no one would ever dare doubt the eternal bond between Manhwa and the Beast Palace. Meng So stared at him, chuckling that Myung was remarkably proactive. Myung smoothly shot back that there was absolutely no reason for a holy Taoist to hesitate when it came to saving those in desperate need, suggesting they immediately write the contract down before discussing any finer points. Meng So felt a sudden chill, realizing internally that something was going terribly wrong, but he asked anyway if he just needed to hand over the exclusive trade rights. Myung laughed out loud, reassuring him that if there was anything else Manhwa wanted, he could simply inform him later. After a few tense seconds of heavy silence, Meng So looked deeply into his eyes and stated that he would ask one crucial thing before he put pen to paper. He explained that the sole reason he was entrusting this massive request to him was because, from everything he had witnessed, Myung was at least not an evil human being. He pointed out with absolute gravity that if Myung had chosen to slaughter the sacred ink-scaled blood python earlier, he would have never brought up this trade alliance. Meng So demanded a sacred vow, telling him to promise that no matter how massive of a profit he took from this deal, he must completely resolve the starvation and hardships of the people of Yunnan. Myung looked back with total seriousness and gave his solemn promise. Satisfied, Meng So took the official papers and began writing down the terms with incredible speed, finally pressing his grand official stamp onto the document. Myung eagerly snatched up the paper to read it over, and as he scanned the lines, he was utterly stunned. He realized to his amazement that not only were the contents regarding the exclusive tea trade rights perfectly laid out, but every single minor clause about potential issues in the distribution process had been meticulously and flawlessly recorded. It was done to an unbelievable degree for something supposed to have been written completely on the spot. Myung realized that this entire trade structure was a conclusion that had already been fully worked out in the palace master's brilliant mind long ago, silently acknowledging that this man was a terrifying genius. Mengso looked up from the desk, asking if there was anything else he required. Full of pure satisfaction, Myung replied that this was more than enough. He mentioned that he would go grab Cheon, since he was technically acting as the official proxy for the Manhwa sect leader right now. However, Mengso raised a hand to stop him, stating that he specifically required Myung's personal thumbprint on the contract. A startled Myung questioned why it had to be his, asking why the master wanted his mark specifically. Mengso looked at him with intense respect, asking if he was not the one destined to become the future's absolute strongest swordsman in the world, commanding him to imprint his mark. Hearing those words, Myung gladly pressed his thumb down. Mengso picked up the finalized document, but then hesitated, admitting that this time, he had one deeply personal request to ask of him, rubbing the back of his neck as he confessed that it was actually a bit embarrassing. And with that final revelation, the flashback concludes, snapping directly back to the present moment in the Grand Hall, where Myung is currently bowing flat on his face, eagerly waiting before the mighty throne. To the utter shock of everyone present, Myung speaks up, humbly beseeching the great palace master of the southern region Beast Palace. He begs for pity on behalf of his group, who have traveled from so far away, pleading for permission to trade with Yunnan. Following their prepared script, the palace master of the Beast Palace, Mengso, roars at the top of his lungs. His explosive shout creates a literal shockwave through the hall as he demands to know if they are unaware that trade between the Beast Palace and the Central Plains is strictly prohibited. He warns them that even if they are guests, they cannot expect to return safely after trying to meddle with the laws passed down by their ancestors. Myung slams his head against the floor in a deep kowtow. He calls out to the palace master, asking if merchant guilds from the Central Plains do not already travel to and from Yunnan anyway. Mengso barks back at him, demanding to know if he is trying to insult the Beast Palace by bringing that up now. Myung quickly clarifies that this is not his intention. He argues that instead of letting countless people from the Central Plains set foot on the soil of Yunnan, allowing only a single group to enter and exit would actually be a far better way to uphold their ancestors' legacy. Hearing this, the elders begin exchanging glances with one another. Myung presses on, declaring that they respect the Beast Palace more than anyone else in the Central Plains, and they are fully prepared to follow their laws. Mengso challenges him, asking how he can possibly guarantee that. Myung proudly states that they are the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme and disciples of the Manhua Sect, a group that lost its former prosperity after being shunned by the Central Plains. He then raises his head and argues that if even people like them cannot understand Yunnan, then there is no point in even talking about the rest of the Central Plains. Mengso counters, stating that people from the Central Plains still cannot be trusted. He points out that the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme was also a man of the Central Plains, asking if they seriously think they can equate themselves with such a legendary figure. Myung replies that while they cannot equate themselves to him, they can certainly follow his legacy. He reasons that if the Sword Supreme intended to protect Yunnan, then, as his descendants, they must do so as well. He asks if this is not the ultimate duty of the Manhua sect, which reveres the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme as their ancestor and primary symbol. Watching him perform, Cheon mutters to himself in disbelief, wondering if that guy was always such a smooth talker. It feels to him like Myung is just rattling it off as if he memorized the whole thing. Myung continues, starting to say that therefore, they're Manhua sect, but then he suddenly freezes, awkwardly repeating the words. He has completely forgotten his next line. Right then, he sneakily glances down at his hand, where the speech had been written. Cheon and Mengso look on in absolute shock. Internally, Mengso fumes, cursing the brat because they went through so much effort to memorize it together. Cheon is equally stunned, realizing that the guy really did just memorize a script. Still staring intently at his arm, Myung mumbles the previous lines under his breath to find his place, whispering about the great southern region Beast Palace Master, begging for permission, the merchant guilds already traveling, and being descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme. Finally hitting the spot where he left off, he seamlessly shifts back to a loud voice, pleading for the palace master to recognize the true sincerity of the Manhwa sect. Mengso lets out a subtle sigh of relief. Myung carries on, declaring that in the end, if a connection is not forged by human hands, it remains a mere coincidence. He poses a final question. If the ancestors of the Beast Palace had no intention of letting them into this land, how could they have possibly made it here to meet the palace master himself? Mengso plays along, demanding if he is suggesting that their ancestors personally opened the path to Yunnan for them. Myung firmly replies that this is exactly what he believes. Mengso falls silent, while Myung notes to himself that their prepared script ends here. It was all about procedures and justification. Even though they are resuming trade out of pure necessity, everything must follow a proper order. Rather than the Beast Palace Master asking for a favor directly, it looks much better if he simply grants a humble request from the Manhua sect. After all, even a seemingly minor detail like that could undermine a leader's authority. Mengso then addresses the room, asking what the protectors think. Myung tells himself that this strategy should work out perfectly, as there were no forced arguments, and he clearly explained how it serves as a win-win situation for both sides. However, one of the elders stands up. It is the first protector himself, who addresses the palace master, admitting that while the boy's words are not entirely wrong, the ancestors' legacy must still be strictly upheld. Mengso questions him, pointing out that they are the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme, to whom their ancestors were deeply grateful. He asks if the first protector is truly against it despite that fact. The first protector argues that if it were the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme himself, it would be a completely different story. However, these people are merely his descendants, so they cannot possibly extend the same treatment to them when they share no actual blood relation. Another protector chimes in, agreeing that their ancestors' dying wishes are of the utmost importance, and urges the palace master that this proposal must absolutely not be accepted. Others join the fray, telling the palace master never to forget the humiliation they suffered at the hands of the Central Plains. They declare that sometimes pride is far more important than life itself, demanding that they uphold the pride of Yunnan. Soon, the entire room erupts into a unified chant to uphold the pride of Yunnan, leaving Meng so completely taken aback. Internally, Meng so laments, wondering if it is truly impossible even after going through all this trouble. He set up this entire play just to change the hearts of these stubborn elders, yet absolutely nothing has changed. The rift between the Central Plains and Yunnan runs too deep and too wide. No matter how hard he tries to leap over it, he fails, wondering how it could possibly be this deep. Visibly irritated, Myung repeats the phrase dying wishes with pure venom. Mengso is startled by the sudden intervention as a furious Myung continues, mocking them for spouting such nonsense all because of some dying wishes. Cheon and Yoonjong panic internally, wondering what on earth is wrong with that jerk and realizing they need to stop him and shut his mouth immediately. The two rush toward him, with Cheon shouting for him to wait. But before they can even finish their sentences, Myung unleashes an overwhelming wave of conquering King's Haki, completely knocking them unconscious. Myung demands to hear it, asking what grand legacy their ancestors actually left behind. One of the outraged elders snaps back, calling him an insolent brat. Myung mocks them for just muttering instead of answering, before roaring at them, demanding to know exactly what that dying wish is. The first protector fires back, stating that the wish left by their ancestors was to never communicate with those from the Central Plains, and that they deal with anyone who breaks it with nothing less than death. Myung bluntly counters that in that case, everyone in this room, and all the people lined up outside, should just drop dead right now. The first protector looks completely baffled, so Myung spells it out, pointing out their own presence and the fact that the Peace Merchant Guild has already entered Kunming. He demands to know what they are doing by failing to stop the Central Plainsmen who are openly traveling to and from Yunnan. He declares that they should all just offer up their necks, asking if he is wrong. He acknowledges that he understands it is a matter of survival, but notes that this survival seems to only be used as an excuse whenever it happens to be convenient for them. The rest of the room falls into dead silence. Furious, the first protector asks if he is actively insulting the Beast Palace right now. Myung clarifies that he is not insulting the palace, but rather insulting him directly, telling him to stop using the Beast Palace as a shield. He questions their definition of upholding a legacy, asking if a blind ban is truly the only legacy their ancestors left behind. The first protector barks an order for someone to seize him, but Myung drowns him out with a shout, asking if their ancestors did not ultimately wish for them to take good care of the people of Yunnan. Myung presses on, mocking them by saying their ancestors would be absolutely thrilled to see the current state of Yunnan. He scoffs that they would surely applaud the elders for upholding a legacy while letting their own people starve to death. He tells them to put themselves in their ancestors' shoes, asking if they would be happy to see their descendants act this way. He adds that if he were in their place, he would have beheaded every single one of them. The first protector sputters, asking what a kid like him could possibly know to speak so recklessly, claiming that they have kept their traditions. But Myung cuts him off, stating that only those who lack the ability to judge for themselves keep bringing up their ancestors. He asks if they honestly believe their ancestors wanted future generations to follow their words blindly, noting that no parent ever wants their child to become a puppet devoid of personal will. Myung walks over and grabs Yunjong, pointing out that as soon as Yunjong arrived in Kunming, he spent all of his personal funds and even went as far as selling his own sword just to help the struggling people of Yunnan. He poses a crucial question, asking that in the eyes of the very ancestors they speak of, who would appear more benevolent and genuinely caring toward Yunnan. Yunjong, who gave up everything he had to fill the stomachs of the poor citizens, or the elders, who ignore those who are literally dying just to blindly uphold a single phrase passed down from the past. The first protector is left completely speechless. Internally, Myung reflects that a dying wish is literally just a wish. It is something meant to be taken as a lesson, not as an absolute, unchanging law. With the world changing so rapidly, he wonders how long they intend to cling to those old-fashioned words to feel satisfied. He asks himself if they will do this until they are dead, or until their palace is ruined. Legacy his ass. Realizing there is absolutely no need to talk to these people anymore, he decides to walk away. He announces aloud that he just wasted his time for absolutely nothing, and orders his companions to leave. As they turn to go, Meng So stands up and commands them to stop for a moment. He turns his attention to Yunjong, asking if he said his name was Yunjong. After Yunjong confirms it, Meng So tells him that there is something he needs to ask him. Meng So locks his gaze onto Yunjong, demanding to know the truth. He reveals he was informed that Yunjong spent his very own personal funds back in Kunming just to provide relief for the impoverished locals. With a piercing glare, the palace master questions why he would ever do such a thing. Yunjong stands there completely stunned, unable to fully grasp the true meaning behind the giant's words. Sensing his confusion, Meng So presses harder, reminding him that he is a man of the Central Plains, someone who is deeply unwelcome in the Yunnan region. On top of that, he arrived here carrying a strict mission for his sect. He asks again, with growing intensity, why he would choose to do such a thing under those circumstances. Internally, Yunjong's mind races as he questions his own actions, wondering why exactly he helped those people and what kind of answer the formidable palace master is actually looking for. Breaking his silence, he looks up and calmly admits that he does not quite understand the intent behind the question. Meng So does not back down, firmly repeating that he simply asked why he chose to perform such an act of charity. Yunjong shakes his head, stating he still fails to understand the gravity of the question. He challenges the very premise, asking if a person truly needs a calculated reason to help another human being. Whether they are from Yunnan or the Central Plains, it does not matter to him at all. If there is someone standing in front of him who desperately needs help, he will help them, because that is the fundamental lesson he was taught by his beloved sect. Hearing this, Chung Myung chimes in, grumbling that the gesture was quite excessive though, and Jo Gul quickly nods in agreement. Meng So narrows his eyes, testing the young disciple's resolve. He asks if Yunjong is implying that if he encounters a similar tragic situation in the future, he will choose to do the exact same thing. Yunzhang firmly objects, explaining that the way of the Tao does not work in such a rigid manner. If the Tao can be easily named and described, then it is not the true, eternal Tao. Similarly, circumstances and human hearts are always differing. So how could there ever be an identical situation? He concludes that he does not follow a strict script. He simply acts as his heart leads him in the moment. Mangso repeats the words, musing over the concept of acting solely as the heart leads. He notes that, at that specific time, Yunzhang simply felt the urge to help, even if it meant going to the absolute extreme of selling his own precious sword. Yunzhang lowers his head slightly, admitting that he is currently reflecting deeply on that exact matter. Mangso pushes further, asking if this reflection means he genuinely regrets his choices. But Yunzhang looks up with unshakable resolve, clarifying that while he is reflecting, he absolutely does not regret what he did. Mangso calls those strange, contradictory words, demanding to know what the boy could possibly mean by that. Yunzhang explains that he must reflect on the fact that he acted recklessly, ultimately placing the safety of his fellow disciples in danger. That part is a mistake, and it is something he should rightfully blame himself for. However, he refuses to ever be ashamed of helping starving people. The Manhwa sect is his entire world, his everything. And that is exactly why he cannot be ashamed of his actions. The Manhwa sect he knows and loves would have always placed the lives and safety of starving human beings far above a mere piece of forged metal. At the very least, this is the righteous path he has learned and practiced, and it is the path he will continue to walk for the rest of his life. Mangso steps closer, delivering a heavy hypothetical question, asking if he would maintain that stance even if it meant directly defying the explicit will of his own sect. Yunzhang fires back without a shred of hesitation, declaring that the Manhwa sect never taught him to turn his back on the suffering. Internally, Yunzhang's thoughts swirl with indignation. He wonders if Mangso is implying that he would carry out his own selfish will against his sect, or if the palace master actually believes Manhwa values a weapon more than dying people. He reassures himself that the true will of his sect is never different from his own, because the Manhwa sect he knows is built on true righteousness. He speaks aloud with fiery passion, proclaiming that a Taoist who climbs a secluded mountain just to comfortably discuss the Tao is ultimately nothing more than an egoist. Such a person ignores the raging storms of the secular world just to chase their own personal comfort. That is why a true Taoist must instead recognize, comprehend, and actively look after the suffering world. The Tao is not some abstract concept to be safely locked away inside the heart. It is something that must be fiercely practiced with one's own hands and feet. He adds with absolute certainty that if it were the current sect leader standing there, he would have tried to save those starving people by selling his own beard, let alone a mere sword. He continues his speech, asserting that while the glory of the Manhwa sect is undoubtedly important, if that glory does not actively lead to the betterment of people's lives, then what does it even exist for? Is it merely for the petty, self-righteous pleasure of the Taoists themselves? Yunzhang confesses that he has been searching for this very answer until now, constantly wondering why it absolutely must be Manhwa that rises to greatness. To himself, he recognizes that this is the burning question he has always asked his own soul, the lingering doubt that kept him awake at night. He speaks out again, asking why the Manhwa sect must reclaim its past glory, and if anyone present truly knows the answer. Internally, a sudden wave of clarity washes over him. The grand answer he could never find, even while practicing his martial arts day in and day out, is finally being redefined right now in his mind. He boldly declares to the entire room that there is no predefined reason. Reclaiming their glory isn't pointless, but rather, they have to actively create that reason themselves. If the Manhwa sect appears glorious only in the selective eyes of its own members, then it will become easily replaceable by any other martial arts sect at any given time. Standing right behind him, the first protector watches the young disciple in utter amazement as Yunzhang continues his powerful monologue. Yunzhang proclaims that if their hard-earned glory makes the heavy lives of other people just a little bit easier, then every single disciple of the Manhwa sect will be able to boast of their name with genuine, unyielding pride. He vows that he will make Mount Hua completely irreplaceable, transforming it into a sanctum where everyone in the entire world can rejoice in its glory together. That is his true, undeniable calling as a disciple of Mount Hua. As the final words leave his mouth, he feels an immense, suffocating weight finally lift from his soul. Meng So observes the boy in profound silence, wondering to himself how a mere youth can possess such terrifyingly absolute conviction. He realizes that regardless of whether the direction is technically right or wrong, this child deeply understands what he must do. He understands his role as a true martial artist and what he must pursue as a seeker of both martial arts and the Grand Tao. This is the very sect that produced the legendary Plum Blossom Sword Supreme. In the past, Meng So had only heard tales of the unparalleled greatness of their swordsmanship. But looking at Yunzhong, he realizes that Mount Hua was, from its very inception, a sect created by true Taoists, and the righteous Tao they pursued is clearly being passed down flawlessly to this child. He continues to reflect internally, weighing the bitter public sentiment of Yunnan, the sacred dying wishes of his ancestors, and his own heavy authority as the palace master. He admits to himself that he has also been cowardly avoiding risks under the convenient pretext of reality, and he decides he can no longer allow himself to live in such shame. Turning around to face the entire assembly, Meng So commands every member of the palace to listen closely. He boisterously decrees that from this exact moment onward, no merchant guild originating from the Central Plains is allowed to enter the borders of Yunnan. Instead, all trade between Yunnan and the Central Plains will exclusively be conducted with the single merchant guild representing the Mount Hua sect. The surrounding elders instantly panic, stepping forward to desperately change his mind, but Meng So roars at the top of his lungs, commanding them to be silent. He furiously demands to know just how much more they intend to make him feel ashamed. He points out that a complete stranger, someone who has absolutely no connection to Yunnan, willingly tried to feed the poor of their city by selling his own weapon, yet they expect him, the almighty palace master of the Beast Palace, to ignore his own starving people just to rigidly uphold ancestral dying wishes. He barks at them, asking if that is the hollow kind of pride they truly want to protect. His roar is so incredibly packed with internal energy that it generates a visible, powerful shockwave ripping through the hall. He pushes forward with his verbal onslaught, asking if there is a single thing wrong with what the Mount Hua disciples stated. He questions if their ancestors would have truly wanted the innocent people of Yunnan to starve to death in the name of a grudge. He declares that if their predecessors were indeed such heartless people, then they don't deserve to be respected anyway. He vows that if he meets them in the afterlife, he will be the very first person to stand tall and speak his mind, telling them directly that the living people of Yunnan were far more precious to him than any ancient dying wishes. Outside the grand building, the ordinary palace warriors gather around, completely captivated and deeply moved as they overhear their leader's fierce speech echoing through the walls. To himself, Meng So softens slightly, wondering why his ancestors wouldn't have also possessed hearts that cherished the people of Yunnan. Deep down, they likely felt the exact same pain he does, because they too were proud people of Yunnan. The first protector slowly steps forward, but this time, his demeanor is entirely different. He softly tells the palace master to do exactly as he wishes. He reasons that since he will likely be the first among them to meet their predecessors in the afterlife, he will gladly be the first to bow his head and beg for their forgiveness. If it means the people of Yunnan can finally taste happiness, he acknowledges just how long they have bitterly endured this isolation. It has been far too many painful years. He admits that they have done more than enough. They were simply old, stubborn, and ignorant, failing to realize just how much time had passed while they nursed their hatred. Thanks to that young Taoist from the Mount Hua sect, he has finally come to his senses. He realizes they were desperately chasing after a feudal past, and they must stop this madness immediately. He notes with a heavy heart that it is quite late, but despite the massive delay, he is still incredibly glad they have finally realized the truth. As he finishes speaking, a single, heavy tear escapes his eye and falls to the floor. To the absolute shock of Meng So, the first protector drops to his knees, announcing that they will formally withdraw their ignorant objections and fully follow the palace master's grand will from this day forward, imploring him to save the future of Yunnan. Seizing the moment, Mangso turns back to the crowd and commands everyone to listen. He declares that he will tolerate absolutely no further objections from anyone. If they truly recognize him as the supreme palace master of the Beast Palace and respect his ultimate authority, they must never question this matter again. He officially grants exclusive trade rights to the Manhwa sect and orders the immediate resumption of trade with the Central Plains. In perfect unison, every single elder and warrior bows deeply to the ground, their voices echoing through the halls as they shout that they obey his command. Mangso looks out into the distance, reflecting internally on the past 100 years. During that incredibly long stretch of time, they could never leap over the suffocating wall of hatred and betrayal, choosing instead to keep themselves completely imprisoned beneath its shadow. He muses that perhaps they simply wanted to avoid the harsh reality right in front of their eyes by hiding behind the convenient shield of ancestral dying wishes. Because they, who were trapped in darkness for generations, had never managed to climb above that steep, terrifying cliff. But today, the heavy chains of that restraint have finally been shattered to pieces. Ironically, with the direct help of a person from the Central Plains, the very region they had spent a century hating. He walks over to Chung Myung, looking him in the eyes, and confesses that he has nothing but words of the deepest gratitude to offer them. With a casual, characteristic smirk, Chung Myung simply replies that he is just glad everything worked out well for everyone involved. With a genuine, warm smile breaking across his face, Mangso openly admits that when he initially accepted the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Supreme as guests into the Beast Palace, it was a calculated measure mixed with various ulterior motives. However, he promises that from this exact moment onward, all hidden agendas are completely gone. He addresses the entire room with a booming, proud voice, declaring that he will no longer recognize them merely as the distant descendants of a past legend, but truly as the righteous disciples of the Manhwa sect, honored guests, and lifelong friends of the Beast Palace. From this day forward, disciples of the Manhwa sect will be treated no differently from official members of the Beast Palace anywhere within the borders of Yunnan, and they will never face an ounce of discrimination for being from the Central Plains. Chung Myung grins mischievously, nudging the giant, reminding him that things working out nicely is one thing, but he must remember that they still have to strictly follow every single term written in their trade contract. Mangso bursts into a hearty, thunderous laugh, slapping his chest as he assures him that a true man's word is his absolute bond. Extending his hand forward, Chung Myung smiles sincerely, telling him that he will place his trust in him, because they are official friends now. Mangso firmly grasps his hand in a powerful, earth-shaking handshake, enthusiastically shouting back that yes, they are indeed friends.